Hey there. Before we begin, you should be in a position that is comfortable to you, and you can let us know in the comments where in the world you are and what is the current time for you. If there's one thing medieval society understood better than anyone might expect, it was the business of pleasure. While the modern world might occasionally side-eye the legality and morality of sex work, the Middle Ages weren't quite so bashful. In fact, medieval brothels were as integral to urban economies as blacksmiths or bakers. That's right, in the grand tapestry of medieval life, brothels were the colourful threads weaving through the economic textile, a little frayed perhaps, but undeniably essential. Let's dive into the economic nitty-gritty of the medieval brothel scene. We're talking about a time when cities were buzzing with the energy of growing trade routes and bustling marketplaces. It wasn't just spices and silks passing through these urban centres. Brothels were as much a part of the city's lifeblood as the marketplace itself. To put it bluntly, if you were a city, you could almost measure your success by the vibrancy of your brothel scene. And if you think that's an exaggeration, consider this. Cities like Paris, London and Milan all had municipally sanctioned brothels, complete with regulations and taxes. These brothels weren't just about fulfilling carnal desires, they were a legitimate part of the urban economy. Municipal authorities often took a pragmatic approach, realizing that trying to suppress such a lucrative industry was as futile as trying to stop the tides. Instead, they decided, if you can't beat 'em, tax 'em. And tax them they did. Brothels contributed to local economies through taxes, which were then used to fund public works and city defences. In some cases, the revenue from brothels was even earmarked for the construction of churches. Talk about divine irony. Now, let's talk numbers. The average cost of services in a medieval brothel might surprise you. In 14th century Paris, a visit to a brothel could cost a labourer a day's wage. We're talking about a couple of deniers, which might seem like pocket change today, but was a significant expense back then. To put this in perspective, consider that a loaf of bread cost about a denier, and a pair of shoes might set you back a few dozen. So, while a trip to the brothel wasn't cheap, it was also not out of reach for the average working man who wanted to splurge every now and then. But hold on, before you start picturing medieval accountants scratching their heads over these bawdy books, let's add a dash of humour to the mix. Medieval accounting was a curious beast, often less about precise numbers and more about creative approximations. Imagine trying to explain line items like wine for the bishop's visit, alongside income from the ladies of the night in the town's financial ledgers. It's enough to make any modern CPA reach for the aspirin. Of course, medieval brothels didn't operate in an anarchic Wild West of debauchery. They were subject to their own set of rules and regulations. Brothel keepers were often required to pay for a license, kind of like a medieval business permit, which allowed them to operate legally. And just like any other business, they had to adhere to city laws regarding cleanliness, operating hours, and the conduct of their employees. In some cities, brothels were even required to close on Sundays and religious holidays. Heaven forbid the good people of the city be tempted away from their pious duties by earthly pleasures. But let's not romanticize this too much. The reality for the women working in these establishments was often grim. While some might have had a degree of autonomy, many were trapped in cycles of poverty and exploitation. Yet, despite the hardships, these women were an integral part of the economic fabric of their cities. They were both vilified and needed, a paradox that still echoes in today's society. So, why did cities tolerate and even regulate these dens of vice? The answer lies in the pragmatic medieval mindset. In an era where morality was often overshadowed by economic necessity, the brothel was a necessary evil. It was better to have a regulated industry that could be taxed and monitored than to drive it underground, where it could fester into something far worse. In this curious dance of morality and economy, medieval brothels stood as testament to the complexities of human society. They were simultaneously signs of urban prosperity and reminders of the societal challenges that persisted in the shadows of history's great narratives. And whether they were seen as scandalous or simply a part of everyday life, they were undeniably a cornerstone of medieval urban economies. So, the next time you hear about the glitz and glamour of medieval courts and castles, remember the brothels, lurking in the background, quietly supporting the grand narrative with their considerable economic contributions. It's a history lesson you won't find in your average textbook, but it's one that tells you a lot more about the real world than tales of knights and chivalry ever could. Moving from the grand tapestry of medieval society to the nitty-gritty of medieval brothel operations is like switching from a sweeping cinematic aerial shot to a close-up of the bustling backstage. Behind the velvet curtains and the flickering candlelight, there's a whole lot more going on than meets the eye. So let's peek behind the scenes, shall we? First up, the madam, the queen bee of the hive. She was the manager, the head honcho, the one making sure the gears of this peculiar machine ran smoothly. In many ways, she was the medieval equivalent of a modern-day CEO, albeit with slightly different board meetings. Her role was critical, as she handled everything from staffing to finances, ensuring that both patrons and workers were satisfied. Well, at least as much as one could expect in the 14th century. If there were awards for multitasking, medieval madams would have a trophy case to rival an Olympic athletes. Bouncers, on the other hand, were the unsung heroes of the brothel world. These burly fellows were there to ensure that things didn't get too rowdy or, heaven forbid, violent. Think of them as the medieval HR department with muscles instead of memos. They were tasked with maintaining order, sometimes with nothing more than a stern look or a well-timed clearing of the throat. And let's not forget the economic aspect. These guys had to be paid, and their wages were a necessary expense in the brothel's ledger. It's like hiring a bouncer for your local Starbucks. But instead of stopping folks from bringing in outside coffee, they ensured clients weren't bringing in outside chaos. Workers, the backbone of the operation, were often a mix of locals and those who had travelled from afar seeking better fortunes. The harsh reality? Many of them ended up here, due to limited options, caught in the economic web of poverty and societal constraints. Yet, they were indispensable, providing not just services but also companionship and a listening ear in a world that offered few outlets for such human connections. It's a grim reminder that while the brothel might have been seen as a necessary evil by city officials, it was also a place where survival trumped morality for many. Now, let's tackle the topic of hygiene. Cue the collective shudder of modern sensibilities. The myth of the filthy medieval brothel is half truth and half exaggeration. Sure, sanitation standards were practically non-existent by today's germophobic standards, but medieval folks weren't ignorant of cleanliness. Brothels had to comply with city regulations, which sometimes included rules about washing and cleanliness. Granted, clean in the Middle Ages might mean a quick rinse in a communal tub, but it wasn't the squalid cesspool some imagine. In fact, some establishments were relatively plush, with linens changed occasionally and rooms aired out when possible. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a 3-star motel, a bit rough around the edges but serviceable. Safety was another area with myths ripe for busting. While danger certainly lurked, brothels were often safer than the streets outside. The bouncers played a part here, as did the madams, who were known to fiercely protect their workers from unruly patrons. In some cities, brothels were located in designated areas, almost like a medieval red light district, allowing for some level of oversight and control. It was a delicate balance, like walking a tightrope with a basket of eggs. Now let's spice things up with a modern twist. Compare the operations of a medieval brothel to today's gig economy and you'll find surprising parallels. Flexible hours? Check. A mix of autonomy and exploitation? Double check. The need for security and regulation? Absolutely. Swap the candlelit rooms for Uber rides, and you start to see that while the products might differ, the workplace dynamics have eerie similarities. It's a testament to how the more things change, the more they stay the same. But let's not get too swept up in romanticizing the brothel as some kind of bohemian haven. The reality was often much harsher, with women facing exploitation, disease, and societal scorn. Yet, amidst this grim landscape, they carved out a space for themselves, a testament to human resilience and adaptability. As the medieval cities grew, so did the demand for these establishments, creating a cycle of supply and demand that was as unyielding as the stone walls of the cities themselves. The brothel was a microcosm of medieval urban life, reflecting the complexities, contradictions, and crude realities of the time. It was a place where economics, morality, and human nature converged, creating a unique and often misunderstood corner of history. So, as we close this section, remember that medieval brothels were not just about scandal and sin. They were vibrant, complex operations, driven by the same forces that shape human behavior today: survival, economic necessity, and the ever-present quest for connection. And while they might not feature prominently in tales of knights and chivalry, their story is one that deserves its own spotlight in the annals of history. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the layers of this fascinating and often underappreciated world. As we peel back another layer of this historical onion, let's face the glaring contradictions that medieval brothels exposed in society. Picture a knight in shining armour, galloping off to a chivalric tournament, yet later, possibly seeking solace in the very establishments his lady would rather ignore. Sounds scandalous, right? But the truth is, the brothel was an open secret, tolerated and even patronised by those who publicly denounced it. Double standards? More like double entendres. Let's jump into the social dynamics of this not-so-hushed world. The medieval brothel was a place where the rigid class structures of the time could bend, if not break entirely. Nobles, merchants, and even humble peasants might find themselves under the same roof, if only for a fleeting moment. In a world where your birth dictated your path more than your skills ever could, brothels were a rare space of social fluidity. Of course, it's not as if everyone suddenly became best friends over a shared ale, far from it. But the presence of people from all walks of life in one place was an anomaly in an otherwise tightly stratified society. Now let's spice things up with some legalese. Medieval lawmakers had a love-hate relationship with brothels. Emphasis on love when tax revenue was due. Municipal records from cities like Florence and Venice reveal a fascinating tug-of-war between morality and practicality. In 1358, Florence passed an ordinance that aimed to limit the number of brothels, citing moral concerns. Yet, by the late 14th century, Venice had flipped the script, recognizing the economic boon of regulated brothels and creating state-sanctioned zones for them. They even employed officials to oversee the industry, kind of like a medieval Yelp, minus the stars and snarky reviews. Meanwhile, the church was pulling its hair out, or at least threatening damnation from the pulpit on Sundays. Yet, the financial contributions of brothels to church coffers via taxes can't be overlooked. Talk about biting the hand that feeds. Church leaders lambasted these dens of sin, yet turned a blind eye when the tax collector came knocking. It was the ultimate religious paradox. Condemn the sin, but cash the sinner's cheque. Speaking of paradoxes, let's address the societal hypocrisies head-on. Women working in brothels were branded as morally corrupt, yet their clientele, often the very men who outwardly professed piety and virtue, escaped such judgment. It's a tale as old as time. Blame the woman, absolve the man. These ladies bore the brunt of societal scorn, yet their services were in high demand. It's a bit like despising the rain but loving the harvest. And while we're dismantling myths, let's chat about the supposed fallen woman trope. Sure, many women were forced into sex work by economic desperation, but the narrative that they were all tarnished damsels is too simplistic. Some women exercised agency, using the brothel as a stepping stone to better prospects. In fact, a few even amassed enough wealth to buy their freedom or start their own businesses. It's a bit like the medieval version of a rags-to-riches story, albeit with a lot more grit and grime. Let's not ignore the primary sources that shed light on public opinion. Court records, like those from 15th century London, are a goldmine of information. They reveal the constant legal wrangling over brothel locations and complaints from neighbours, much like today's bickering over noisy bars in gentrifying neighbourhoods. Yet, the very existence of these records underscores something crucial. Brothels were a known quantity, woven into the fabric of urban life, not some seedy underbelly as often portrayed. And what about public opinion? Well, it was a mixed bag. On one hand, brothels were seen as a necessary evil, a way to keep societal order by channeling baser urges into a controlled environment. On the other, they were viewed as moral cesspools, corrupting the youth and undermining family values. These opposing views often existed side by side, much like the city officials who taxed brothels by day and visited them by night. It's easy to romanticize the medieval brothel as a place of hidden allure and forbidden pleasures. But let's not forget the harsh realities faced by those who lived and worked within its walls. Disease was rampant, and while some cities imposed health checks, these were hardly foolproof. Social stigma was ever present, and the path to a better life was fraught with obstacles. Yet, despite these challenges, the brothel was a nexus where economics, morality, and human nature intersected in a complex dance. As we continue to unravel this historical tapestry, remember that the story of medieval brothels is one of contrasts and contradictions. It's a tale of survival against the odds, a testament to the resilience of those who navigated its murky waters. And while we might chuckle at the absurdities of medieval attitudes, the echoes of those double standards resonate even today. So, stay with us as we delve deeper into the labyrinth of history, where the past often holds a mirror to our present. As our historical deep dive continues, let's saunter into the political power plays and policy shenanigans that medieval brothels stirred up. Imagine the scene: city councils and local governors, caught between moral posturing and economic pragmatism, played a game of chess with brothels as their pawns. These establishments weren't just where the knights and merchants spent their coin. They also influenced policy-making and governance in ways that might make even Machiavelli raise an eyebrow. First, let's address the not-so-secret alliance between brothels and the political elite. In cities like Avignon and Toulouse during the 14th century, brothels were more than just revenue sources. They were political pressure points. The taxes and fees from these establishments were carefully funneled into city coffers, funding everything from public festivities to military defences. In Avignon, the papal seat no less, local brothels contributed a significant chunk of the budget. It's as if the Vatican City had a side hustle in Vegas, scandalous yet financially savvy. Political figures often found themselves tangled in these economic webs, sometimes willingly, sometimes less so. Take the case of Edward III of England. In 1351, amid the throes of the 100 Years' War, he passed legislation to regulate brothels in London, ostensibly to curb immorality, but more likely because he saw an opportunity to squeeze more taxes out of the industry. It's the medieval equivalent of a politician today rallying for a sin tax on vices they themselves enjoy behind closed doors. Speaking of closed doors, let's peek behind them and examine the political scandals that occasionally erupted from these dens of iniquity. The infamous case of the Borgia family, a dynasty so scandalous they make the Kardashians look like the Waltons, illustrates the political entanglements of the time. Pope Alexander VI, a Borgia patriarch, was rumoured to have hosted orgies in the Vatican itself, with brothel workers allegedly attending as special guests. Whether true or apocryphal, such tales highlight the blurred lines between political power and personal indulgence. While we're on the topic of indulgence, let's not overlook the reformers who saw brothels as a blight on society, ripe for regulation or closure. Enter figures like Bernardino of Siena, a 15th century preacher who railed against the moral decay he believed brothels represented. His fiery sermons, delivered with a zeal that would make a modern televangelist blush, pushed for civic purging of these sinful establishments. Yet, despite his fervour, the economic reality often led cities to temper such reforms with a dose of economic realism because, let's face it, sermons don't pay for street repairs. The political influence of brothels wasn't limited to scandal and tax revenue. They also played a role in social policy, albeit indirectly. In many cities, unemployed women were encouraged, sometimes forced, into sex work as a means to control poverty and reduce the burden on public welfare. It's a grim reminder of the societal safety nets, or lack thereof, that shaped policy decisions. This approach was less about moral judgment and more about cold, hard economics. Why support someone when you could tax their labour instead? Let's sprinkle some humour over this historical stew. Imagine today's bureaucrats grappling with the complexities of zoning board meetings, only with the added spice of debating where to place the local brothel district. It's a bit like deciding where to put a new Starbucks, but with considerably more controversy and fewer caramel macchiatos. The political wrangling over brothel locations was a balancing act of appeasing moralists while keeping the city's economy humming, a delicate dance on a tightrope of public opinion. And speaking of public opinion, let's turn to the role of brothels in shaping local governance. In some cases, brothel districts were effectively self-governing, with madams wielding a surprising amount of influence. These women, despite the societal scorn they faced, were savvy operators who knew how to navigate the political landscape to protect their businesses and workers. Picture a medieval version of Leslie Knope, only with more lace and fewer waffles. In Venice, for instance, the brothel district known as the Castelletto was a semi-autonomous zone with its own set of rules and regulations. The Venetian Senate, ever the pragmatists, recognized the value of having a controlled area where desires could be safely indulged. It's the kind of political maneuvering that would make a modern-day city planner nod in understanding, if not outright approval. As we weave our way through this complex tapestry of politics and pleasure, remember that the story of medieval brothels is as much about power and policy as it is about scandal and sin. It's a testament to the human capacity for pragmatic solutions in the face of societal challenges, a reminder that even in the murky waters of history, some things never change. So, as we prepare to delve deeper into this fascinating world, keep your waders on, because the currents of history are about to get even more turbulent. Stay tuned for the next chapter in our exploration of this captivating and often misunderstood slice of history, where the line between virtue and vice is as thin as a medieval coin. As we wade deeper into the historical swamp of medieval brothels, let's pivot to their decline and transformation, a tale of changing times, shifting morals, and urban evolution. The heyday of these establishments, where commerce and carnal knowledge walked hand in hand, began to wane due to a motley crew of factors. Picture this: a medieval cityscape where brothels were as commonplace as cathedrals, suddenly facing an identity crisis as the winds of change blew through its cobblestone streets. First on the docket, let's talk religion, the medieval megaphone that never quite lost its volume. The Black Death in the 14th century didn't just decimate populations, it also prompted a spiritual reckoning. As people tried to make sense of the devastation, a religious revival swept through Europe, casting a shadow of shame over the once thriving brothel industry. Suddenly, the church, previously content to pocket its piece of the pie, started tightening the moral screws. Edicts and sermons denounced the houses of ill repute with renewed vigour. In 1430, the Council of Basel took a hard stance, calling for the closure of brothels in Christian cities. The irony? This moral crusade was partly funded by the very taxes collected from these establishments. It's akin to a health guru who secretly binges on chocolate cake while preaching kale smoothies to the masses. But let's not pin the downfall entirely on the pulpit. Enter law and order, the medieval version of a buzzkill. As cities grew more sophisticated, so too did their approach to governance. By the late Middle Ages, municipal authorities began rethinking their relationship with vice. Regulations became stricter, licenses harder to obtain, and taxes more burdensome. In 1485, London passed laws limiting brothel operations to designated areas, and by the 16th century, the city ordered the closure of many brothels altogether. The result? A shift from a semi-regulated industry to an underground one. Because when you outlaw something people want, it doesn't disappear, it just gets sneakier. And then there's urban development, the unsung hero or villain, depending on your perspective of this historical saga. As cities expanded, real estate became as prized as a knight's armour. Brothels, often located in prime town centres, found themselves edged out by more respectable businesses catering to the burgeoning bourgeoisie. The rise of new trade routes and industries meant that the economic landscape was shifting like quicksand. Brothels, once integral cogs in the urban machine, were gradually replaced by enterprises that promised higher returns and less scandal. It's like swapping out a rickety old cart for a shiny new carriage, out with the old, in with the profitable. Now, let's spare a thought for the women whose lives were most affected by these changes. As brothels declined, many faced even harsher realities. Forced to find new means of survival, some women turned to other forms of labour, often equally exploitative but less visible. The legend of the fallen woman persisted, yet the truth was far less glamorous. A constant battle against poverty and societal judgment. It's a stark reminder that while history often remembers the grand narratives, the everyday struggles of individuals are what truly shape the human experience. Despite the decline, the legacy of medieval brothels remains woven into the fabric of history. They left behind a trail of myths and misconceptions, some as alluring as they are inaccurate. Take the romanticized image of the medieval brothel as a candlelit den of elegance and intrigue. In reality, most were as glamorous as a drafty barn with sanitation standards to match. Yet, the myth endures, perhaps because it's more palatable than the gritty truth. We humans are suckers for a good story, even when reality rudely interrupts with its inconvenient facts. But what about the enduring fascination with medieval brothels? Why do they continue to captivate our imagination centuries later? Perhaps it's the tantalizing mix of vice and virtue, a reminder of humanity's perpetual dance with desire and morality. Or maybe it's the sense of rebellion, the idea that even in the most rigid of societies, there were places where the rules could bend. Whatever the reason, these establishments continue to hold a peculiar allure, both as cautionary tales and as symbols of resilience. As we draw the curtain on this historical exploration, let's circle back to the opening themes. Medieval brothels were indeed the colourful threads in the tapestry of urban life, now faded but never forgotten. They were places where economics, morality, and human nature collided in a chaotic cocktail, each sip more potent than the last. And while the brothels themselves may have crumbled into history's dust, their echoes linger in our collective consciousness, a testament to the complexities and contradictions of human society. So, the next time you're tempted to romanticize the Middle Ages as a time of knights and chivalry, remember the brothels, those bastions of pragmatism and paradox. They remind us that the past is never as simple as it seems, and that beneath the surface of history's grand narratives lie the stories of those who lived, loved, and survived against the odds. In a world where the only constant is change, perhaps the real lesson of medieval brothels is this: no matter the era, the human spirit is as indomitable as it is unpredictable. And that, dear listeners, is a history lesson worth remembering. As the first rays of the sun peek over the horizon, painting the Indian sky with shades of orange and pink, you find yourself in a vibrant world that makes your modern morning routine look downright dull. Welcome to the 4th century Gupta Empire, where the buzz of an empire at its peak wakes you up faster than any alarm clock. Forget the snooze button. Here, the hum of commerce and the chatter of scholars are your wake-up call. The Gupta Empire, a vast realm stretching from the Indus River to the Bay of Bengal, is like the ancient world's version of a superpower. It's an era where innovation and learning aren't just buzzwords, they're the currency of the day. Imagine the excitement of living in a time when the decimal system is hot off the presses, revolutionizing mathematics and making life a bit easier for merchants who'd rather not count on their fingers and toes. And speaking of numbers, let's talk about a guy who knew his way around them better than anyone, Aryabhata. He's the kind of scholar who'd make your high school math teacher swoon. Aryabhata is not just any scholar, he's the Einstein of his time, juggling numbers and celestial bodies with the ease of someone doing a crossword puzzle. But don't worry, there's no quiz at the end of this day in the life. But before we dive into Aryabhata's world, let's take a stroll through the empire itself. The Gupta dynasty, with its golden age reputation, laid the groundwork for what many historians call classical Indian culture. The scale of its reach is impressive, spanning over 1,500 miles. That's like traveling from New York City to Miami, only without the hassle of airport security. This expanse is dotted with bustling cities, each a hub of trade, culture, and intellectual exchange. Economically, the Gupta Empire is a powerhouse. They've got a diversified economy that would make any modern economist nod in approval. Agriculture forms the backbone, with wheat, rice, and sugarcane as staples, but they don't stop there. The empire thrives on trade, both internal and with distant lands like Rome, China, and Southeast Asia. Picture silk, spices, gold coins, and intricate jewelry changing hands faster than you can say supply and demand. But let's not sugarcoat it. The Rome. Gupta trade isn't just a fairy tale of silk and spices. It's a tale of economic dependence and strategic maneuvering. Roman gold coins, like the solidus, are a common currency in Gupta markets, a testament to the intense trade relations. Yet this trade isn't just about goods. It's a two-way street of ideas and culture. Roman culture leaves its mark on Indian artistry and vice versa, making this a truly globalized age within its context. Now, back to Aryabhata. You see, he's not your average number cruncher. Born in 476 CE, he's already a rising star in the world of mathematics and astronomy. His treatise, the Aryabhata, penned at the tender age of 23, is a masterpiece that would make even Pythagoras do a double take. It's here that he introduces the concept of zero, not just as a placeholder, but as a number with its own value. Talk about a game changer. This little zero is about to make calculations a whole lot simpler and pave the way for future mathematical geniuses. Aryabhata's work isn't just about numbers, though. He's got his eyes on the skies, theorizing about the Earth's rotation and the positions of celestial bodies. His calculations of pi, accurate to 4 decimal places, 3.1416, would impress even the most skeptical of modern mathematicians. In a world where the Earth was still flat for many, Aryabhata boldly suggests that it's spinning on its axis. He even dares to calculate the length of a year as 365.25 days, which is pretty darn close to the actual 365.24 2 days. Not bad for a guy without a telescope or the internet, right? But let's not kid ourselves, Aryabhata's theories aren't just about wowing the crowd. They hold practical value in a society where astronomy dictates everything from agriculture to religious rituals. Knowing when the monsoon will hit or when to plant crops isn't just academic, it's a matter of survival. And while we're at it, let's not forget the cultural importance of astrology. The celestial movements, Aryabhata calculates, are believed to influence everything from royal decisions to daily life. As the day unfolds, you wander through the bustling streets of Pataliputra, the empire's capital. It's a city that makes today's urban hubs look provincial. With its complex road networks, splendid gardens, and magnificent palaces, Pataliputra is the beating heart of the Gupta Empire. It's where political power and cultural vibrancy come together in a glorious symphony. Trade here isn't just a transaction, it's a spectacle. Vendors shout their wares, from spices and textiles to more exotic goods like ivory and pearls. The aroma of incense mingles with the scent of freshly ground spices, creating a sensory overload that's both overwhelming and exhilarating. It's a place where merchants haggle over prices and philosophers debate the meaning of life in the same breath. The Gupta rulers, particularly Chandragupta II, known as Vikramaditya, are no strangers to power plays. They know that a stable, prosperous empire requires more than just a keen sense of economic acumen. It's about maintaining a delicate balance between military might, cultural patronage, and strategic alliances. The empire's military prowess is nothing to scoff at, with an army that boasts war elephants and a cavalry that would make any invader think twice. Yet, it's not all glitz and glory. Beneath the golden veneer lies the harsh reality of a society where the caste system dictates every aspect of life. It's a rigid hierarchy that determines your occupation, social interactions, and even the colour of the clothes you wear. The Guptas might be patrons of the arts and sciences, but they're also custodians of a social order that keeps people firmly in their place. As the sun sets, casting long shadows over the city, you can't help but reflect on the paradox of this golden age. It's a time of incredible intellectual and cultural achievements, yet it's also a world where inequality is entrenched and unquestioned. The Gupta Empire is a place of contrasts, where the brilliance of scholars like Aryabhata shines brightly against the backdrop of a society that's as complex as the equations he solves. And so, as you prepare to close the chapter on this day in the 4th century Gupta Empire, you realize that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about the people, the ideas, and the contradictions that make it so endlessly fascinating. Tomorrow promises more discoveries as you continue to unravel the mysteries of this remarkable era. But for now, you rest, knowing that the morning will bring another day of exploration and wonder in a world that's as dazzling as it is daunting. As you drift off, lulled by the sounds of ancient Pataliputra, your mind wanders east to Nalanda and Takshashila, the Ivy Leagues of the 4th century world. These aren't your run-of-the-mill institutions. They're where the creme de la creme of scholars gather, drawn by the magnetic pull of knowledge and the promise of intellectual camaraderie. Think of them as academic Disneylands, minus the mouse ears and overpriced churros. In this world, knowledge is more than power. It's pure, unadulterated currency. Forget Bitcoin and the stock market. Here, intellectual prowess can buy you a seat at the table of history's great thinkers. But entry doesn't come cheap. We're talking tuition fees that would make modern college students wince, 10 cows or a cool 100 gold coins. That's right, if you wanted to rub elbows with the likes of Aryabhata, you had to pony up some serious livestock or cash equivalent. And don't even think about financial aid. Nalanda, located in what is now Bihar, India, is the academic rock star, boasting tens of thousands of scrolls in its libraries and a student body that hails from as far as Tibet, Korea, and even Persia. It's a bustling intellectual hub, a melting pot of ideas that churns out scholars like a knowledge factory. Meanwhile, Takshashila, situated in modern-day Pakistan, is no slouch either. It's renowned for its diverse curriculum, offering everything from grammar and philosophy to medicine and warfare. Just imagine the campus life. Debates that echo through the corridors, scrolls unfurled like today's laptops, and the constant buzz of scholarly discourse. But let's be real. Trading 10 cows for an education isn't just an economic transaction. It's an investment in prestige and influence. Graduates from these institutions often become the backbone of the empire's administrative machinery. They're the bureaucrats, royal advisors, and policymakers who keep the Gupta gears turning smoothly. It's a system that's as much about maintaining societal order as it is about intellectual advancement. The daily grind of a Gupta scholar is a far cry from the Starbucks-fueled all-nighters we associate with modern academia. Picture this. Sunrise sessions of meditation and physical exercise to steel the mind and body, followed by rigorous sessions of memorization and recitation. Classes are intense, with gurus who demand not just rote learning, but critical thinking, a quality that's as rare as hen's teeth in some circles even today. Science, literature, and art flourish under this intellectual canopy, each feeding off the other in a symbiotic relationship that propels innovation. It's a time when literature isn't just words on paper, it's a vehicle for philosophical exploration and social commentary. Take Kalidasa, the Shakespeare of ancient India, whose plays and poems are celebrated for their emotional depth and linguistic beauty. His work, rooted in the rich soil of Sanskrit, offers a window into the cultural ethos of the Gupta era. Then there's the contribution to art, which is nothing short of monumental. Gupta art, with its emphasis on grace and serenity, sets the gold standard for centuries to come. Temples and sculptures from this period reveal not just the aesthetic values, but the spiritual aspirations of a society striving for balance between the material and the mystical. And let's not forget the scientific advancements that are about as groundbreaking as they come. The Gupta period sees strides in medicine, with scholars like Sushruta and Charaka laying down the foundations of what would eventually evolve into Ayurveda. Their texts cover everything from surgery to the medicinal properties of herbs, a testament to a holistic approach to health that's now making a comeback in our modern wellness-obsessed world. But before we get too carried away on a wave of nostalgia, let's bust a myth or two. The idea of a golden age is tempting, but it's also a simplification. While these scholarly institutions are bastions of learning, they're also exclusive clubs, largely inaccessible to those outside the upper echelons of society. The caste system is the elephant in the room, a rigid structure that limits social mobility and keeps knowledge concentrated among those deemed worthy by birthright rather than merit. Moreover, while the pursuit of knowledge is noble, it's not always altruistic. Scholars often have patrons, wealthy individuals or royal families, who finance their studies in exchange for political advice or astrological counsel. It's a quid pro quo that ensures the scholar's survival in a world where intellectual labour isn't exactly rewarded with a 401k plan. Despite these blemishes, it's hard not to marvel at the sheer cultural output of the Gupta period. It's a time of contrasts, where the dazzling brilliance of intellectual achievement is set against the stark realities of societal inequality. Yet, the legacy of Gupta scholarship is undeniable, laying the groundwork for future generations to build upon. As you ponder the world of the Gupta scholar, it's clear that history is more than a collection of dusty old facts. It's a living, breathing narrative of human ambition, creativity, and the eternal quest for understanding. A quest that continues to this day in lecture halls and libraries around the globe. So, as you tuck these tales into the folds of your memory, know that there's more to uncover in this mesmerizing epoch. Tomorrow will bring even more discoveries and perhaps a deeper understanding of the forces that shaped one of history's most fascinating empires. But for now, rest easy with the knowledge that the story is far from over, and the past is always waiting to reveal its secrets to those willing to listen. And as the sun rises again on our journey through the Gupta Empire, we're about to peel back the gilded layers of what's often touted as India's golden age. But before you start envisioning a utopia of endless prosperity and enlightened rulers, let's get real. It was a golden age if you were part of the ruling elite or an upper caste male. For many others, life was less about golden opportunities and more about keeping your head above water. Picture this. You're a farmer in the heartland of the Gupta Empire, where the fields stretch out as far as the eye can see, and the sun beats down with a vengeance that makes your modern-day air-conditioned office seem like paradise. You're growing rice, wheat, and sugarcane, the staples of the empire's agricultural backbone. But before you can start dreaming about your bountiful harvest, there's a little thing called taxes. And let's just say, they're not exactly a walk in the lotus garden. The Gupta administration, with its slick PR machine, wants everyone to believe in the utopia they're selling. But for you, the tax collector is a familiar and not-so-welcome face. Taxes are levied on land, produce, and even the water you use for irrigation, and they don't come cheap. We're talking a hefty chunk of your harvest, about a quarter of it to be precise, going straight into the coffers of the state. And if you think that's steep, remember, there are no tax breaks here, no deductions for dependents or charitable donations. Now, the Gupta rulers are no fools. They know the power of a good story, and they're spinning narratives faster than a weaver at his loom. Their PR machine is all about projecting an image of prosperity and enlightenment. The Gupta kings, especially the bigwig Chandragupta II, position themselves as patrons of the arts, protectors of Dharma, and champions of peace. They commission grand temples and sponsor scholars to write glowing accounts of their reign. It's the ancient equivalent of a presidential photo, op minus the awkward handshakes and baby kissing. But let's not forget, behind the curtain of cultural patronage and public works is a state that's as much about maintaining control as it is about fostering growth. The Gupta administration is a well-oiled machine, with a bureaucracy that keeps tabs on everything from trade to taxes. They've got a network of spies and officials ensuring that the emperor's writ runs smoothly across the empire's vast expanse. It's a system designed to project power and stability, a reminder that the emperor's reach is long and his grip is firm, and here's where things get a bit thorny. The caste system, that infamous social hierarchy, is the glue holding the society together, and it's not exactly known for its flexibility. It's a rigid framework that dictates your life trajectory from birth to death. Your caste determines not just your occupation, but who you can marry, where you can live, and even what you can eat. It's a social order that's as entrenched as it is divisive. For the Gupta rulers, the caste system is a handy tool for maintaining social order. It keeps everyone in their assigned lanes, ensuring that the empire runs smoothly without pesky things like social mobility getting in the way. It's all about stability and predictability, and the Guptas are nothing if not pragmatic. They're playing chess while everyone else is stuck on checkers, using the caste system to reinforce their power and keep potential dissenters in check. But let's not romanticize this as some benevolent oversight. For those at the bottom of the ladder, life is a daily grind with little room for advancement. The untouchables, or Dalits, are relegated to the dirtiest jobs, living on the fringes of society, while even the middle rungs of the ladder, the Vaishyas and Shudras, find themselves hemmed in by rules and restrictions. It's a world where your birthright is your destiny, and there's little you can do to change it. Yet, despite these stark realities, the myth of the Gupta Golden Age endures, partly because it's a story that appeals to our desire for simpler times and grand narratives. It's a tale of enlightened kings and cultural flourishing, an era when India was a beacon of learning and prosperity. And while there's truth to this, it's not the whole story. The Golden Age was a period of contrasts, where the light of intellectual achievement often cast long shadows of inequality and social stratification. As we continue to unravel the layers of Gupta society, it's clear that history is a complex tapestry, woven from both the dazzling threads of achievement and the darker strands of inequality. The Gupta Empire, for all its glory and grandeur, is a reminder that the past is never as simple as it seems. It's a world of power and politics, of culture and control, a world that's as captivating as it is challenging. So, as we pause on this chapter of our journey, remember that the story of the Gupta Empire is far from over. There are more secrets to uncover, more myths to debunk, and more truths to explore. Tomorrow beckons with the promise of new discoveries, and the past is always ready to reveal its tales to those who dare to listen. Stay tuned, because the adventure is just beginning. And as we stand on the brink of diving deeper into the Gupta Empire's bag of tricks, it's time to shift our focus from the hustle and bustle of everyday life to the awe-inspiring feats of science and art that made this era more than just a footnote in history. So, let's crank up the time machine and zoom in on Aryabhatta, the rock-star mathematician and astronomer whose work was centuries ahead of its time. Picture this. Aryabhata, born in 476 CE, is strutting around like the Mick Jagger of mathematics. He's redefined numbers and space in ways that would make any modern mathematician tip their hat. His magnum opus, the Riyabhanja, wasn't just a casual thesis, it was a groundbreaking text that dared to suggest the Earth isn't some flat pancake but a rotating sphere. And he did all this without the luxury of a telescope. Take that, Galileo. Aryabhata's calculations were precise enough to estimate pi at 3,41116 and the length of the solar year at 365.358 days. Not too shabby for a guy who didn't have Google to fact-check his work. Now, Aryabhata's theories weren't just about satisfying intellectual curiosity. They had real-world applications. Farmers and sailors needed to know when the monsoon would roll in or when to plot a course by the stars. His astronomical insights made the unpredictable a bit more predictable. And in a society where astrology was as revered as your favorite celebrity chef, knowing the movements of celestial bodies wasn't just a hobby, it was a necessity. After all, what good is a harvest if the stars aren't aligned in your favor? But let's not get too starry-eyed about Aryabhata. While his work was revolutionary, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The Gupta period was a time when challenging the status quo could land you in hot water. Aryabhata's theories about the Earth's rotation and spherical shape were controversial, to say the least. Many still clung to the idea of a flat Earth and geocentric universe, like a toddler to a security blanket. The scholar was swimming against the tide, and yet his contributions laid the groundwork for future generations who'd eventually prove him right. Speaking of groundbreaking, let's switch gears to Gupta art and its not-so-hidden agenda. The romanticized view is all about grace, serenity, and divine beauty. Think of those sculptures and frescoes that make you want to book a one-way ticket to India. But here's the kicker. Gupta art was as much about political power as it was about aesthetic appeal. Those awe-inspiring temples and sculptures weren't just there to please the eye. They were designed to hammer home the dynasty's divine right to rule. The Gupta rulers, crafty operators that they were, understood that art was a potent form of propaganda. Their temples, like the ones at Deoghar, employed intricate carvings that portrayed deities and mythological scenes, all reinforcing the notion that the Guptas were the rightful protectors of Dharma. It's like the ancient version of a political campaign, only with more chiseled abs and fewer awkward photo ops. Let's break it down. The art of the era was a visual narrative that linked the rulers to the divine, ensuring that the average Joe in the street saw the Guptas as more than just tax collectors. It was about establishing a continuity of power and religious legitimacy, because nothing says, "I'm in charge," quite like being depicted alongside the gods. This wasn't just art for art's sake. It was a strategic move to maintain control over a diverse population and keep the social order intact. And while we're at it, let's talk about the unsung heroes in this artistic endeavor, the artisans and craftsmen who brought these grand visions to life. These skilled workers, often from lower castes, toiled away to create masterpieces that they themselves might not be allowed to worship. Ah, the irony. It's a classic case of talent being used as a tool by those in power, a tale as old as time and as modern as today's gig economy. Now, while we're busy marveling at the artistic and scientific achievements of the Gupta period, it's crucial to remember the economic engine driving these advancements. This wasn't a society that just sat around waiting for inspiration to strike. The Gupta economy was a well-oiled machine, with agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship each playing a vital role. We've already touched on the Rome-Gupta trade, but let's add some numbers to the mix. Roman gold coins, like the solidus, were so prevalent that they became a standard in the Gupta markets, a testament to the empire's reach and influence. Trade wasn't just about luxury goods like silk and spices. It was an exchange of ideas, technology, and culture. This kind of cultural cross-pollination meant that the Gupta craftsmen weren't just influenced by local traditions, but by a wider world of art and innovation. It's like the ancient version of a global marketplace where ideas flowed as freely as goods. And this exchange helped propel the Gupta Empire into the annals of history as an era of enlightenment. But let's not get too carried away with the romance of it all. Underneath the glittering facade of prosperity and progress were the grinding gears of a society where economic disparity was as real as it gets. The caste system ensured that the fruits of this golden age were not shared equally. The artisans who crafted those beautiful sculptures, many of them would never see the inside of the temples they adorned because of their social status. The scholars whose work revolutionized thought, they were often beholden to patrons who dictated the course of their research. The Gupta Empire, for all its achievements, was a land of stark contrasts, a glittering jewel with a dark side. It was a place where the pursuit of knowledge and beauty existed alongside rigid social hierarchies and economic inequality. A reminder that history is never black and white, but rather a complex tapestry of human ambition and struggle. As we pull back from the intricacies of Gupta society, it's clear that this period was as much about strategy and survival as it was about enlightenment and art. And while the myth of the Golden Age persists, it's crucial to look beyond the gilded surface to understand the true nature of this fascinating epoch. Our journey through the Gupta Empire continues, with more layers to peel back and more stories to uncover. Tomorrow promises further exploration into the forces that shaped this era and the legacy it left behind. So, keep your curiosity piqued and your sense of wonder sharp, because the past has plenty more to reveal to those who dare to delve into its depths. Stay tuned, the adventure is far from over. Just as you're getting comfy with the idea of a Gupta empire that dazzles and deceives in equal measure, it's time to look at why this era, despite its glitzy reputation, eventually went the way of disco pants and the dodo. As the sun sets over the empire, casting long shadows on its golden age, the cracks in its glittering facade become all too apparent. You see, the Gupta Empire wasn't brought down by a single cataclysmic event or a dramatic battle scene fit for a Bollywood epic. No, its demise was more like a slow, painful unraveling, a tragic opera of internal strife and external pressures that even the most gifted playwright would hesitate to script. First, let's talk about those pesky internal affairs. Much like a complicated family drama, the Gupta rulers had their fair share of squabbles. As the empire expanded, consolidating control over its vast territories became a Herculean task. Administrative efficiency gave way to bureaucratic bloat, and maintaining order became akin to juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle. The succession disputes didn't help either. When rulers couldn't agree on who should wear the imperial crown, the result was often civil unrest, the kind that kept everyone from the peasants to the palace guards on edge. Think of it as Game of Thrones without the dragons. Then there were the external pressures. The empire's borders were like the revolving doors of a busy department store, constantly being tested by the likes of the Huns, those formidable horsemen who seemed to pop up everywhere in ancient history like an unwanted pop-up ad. These invasions weren't just annoying, they were downright destabilizing. Even the mightiest of Gupta kings struggled to keep these determined invaders at bay, and with each incursion the empire's resources were stretched thinner than a hipster's moustache. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate the irony. The Gupta Empire, with its penchant for projecting stability and power, was ultimately undone by the very forces it sought to control. The military might that once made invaders quiver in their sandals became a double-edged sword, draining the empire's coffers and sapping its strength. The thriving trade networks that supported its economy were disrupted by warfare and instability, making it increasingly difficult to sustain the lavish lifestyle that the elite had grown accustomed to. In a world where economic downturns often spelled doom, the Guptas were learning a harsh lesson in financial management. But even as the empire crumbled, its impact on math, science and culture remained indelible. Aryabhata's mathematical genius, with his groundbreaking work on zero and pi, didn't just vanish with the empire's decline. His theories and calculations were like seeds scattered in the wind, eventually taking root in future civilizations and influencing scholars from Baghdad to Bologna. The Gupta legacy, much like the decimal system itself, was built to last, an enduring testament to the power of intellectual freedom. And then there's the cultural legacy. The artistic and literary achievements of the Gupta period set standards that echoed through the centuries. Kalidasa's poetic works and the intricately carved temples left an indelible mark on India's cultural landscape. These weren't mere relics of a bygone era, they became the foundation upon which future Indian civilizations built their own cultural identities. It's as if the Gupta Empire, even in its twilight, was whispering to the future, "Take what we've done and make it better." So, where does that leave us in our quest to understand this enigmatic empire? It's a tale as old as history itself, the rise and fall of a civilization that dared to dream big but was ultimately brought down by its own complexities. The Gupta Empire was a paradoxical place, a land of intellectual freedom and social rigidity, of dazzling achievement shadowed by entrenched inequalities. It reminds us that history is not a fairy tale of heroes and villains, but a rich tapestry woven with ambition, creativity, and the eternal struggle for power. As we bid farewell to the Guptas, we're left with a legacy that's as inspiring as it is cautionary. It's a reminder that even the most brilliant epochs can be undone by hubris and mismanagement, yet their contributions can resonate through time, shaping the world in ways we can only begin to understand. So, as you drift off to sleep with visions of ancient scholars and majestic palaces, remember that history's greatest lessons often lie in its shadows, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to look beyond the gilded surface. In a world where the toga was haute couture and philosophy was the dinner table conversation, ancient Greece's economy was as much dictated by its rugged terrain as it was by its Olympian gods. With more mountains than a marathon runner could handle and coastlines that could make a mapmaker weep, Greece was a geographic jigsaw puzzle. This natural mosaic dictated not just where people lived, but how they survived. The Greeks had to get creative, and by creative, I mean they had to hustle. Local resources were as limited as a Spartan's wardrobe choices, so they turned to the sea, an ancient version of the World Wide Web, connecting them to the wealth of other cultures and economies. The Greek landscape was like a reality show, where the contestants, in this case city-states, had to outwit, outplay, and outlast each other. Those city-states like Athens and Corinth became the economic powerhouses, or perhaps I should say, the CEO states. If you were looking for fertile plains, you were as out of luck as a philosopher in a debate without an audience. With only about 20% of the terrain being arable, the Greeks weren't winning any agricultural awards. But what they lacked in wheat fields, they made up for with olive trees and grapevines. Olive oil and wine became their golden tickets. Commodities so essential, they were practically the ancient Greek version of Uber and Netflix. Now, let's talk trade. The Greeks traded like it was Black Friday every day. With their ships cutting through the Aegean and beyond, they bartered their way into prosperity. They swapped olive oil, wine, and pottery for grain, metals, and luxuries. This barter system, while charmingly quaint, was not without its headaches. Imagine trying to swap a dozen amphorae of wine for a sack of grain, and having to haggle over the quality of said grain. It was like trying to trade a used car without Kelly Blue Book values. Enter the coin-based economy around 600 BCE, a revolution as significant as the invention of Wi-Fi. Suddenly, instead of hauling around a wagon full of chickens to buy a loaf of bread, you could simply hand over a coin. These coins, often stamped with the image of the local bigwig or deity, became the universal language of trade, a kind of ancient Bitcoin. The adoption of coinage, however, wasn't as smooth as the shine on those new drachmas. It was more akin to the chaos of trying to explain the internet to your grandparents. Imagine the confusion when people first started using these shiny metal discs. Some probably tried to eat them. The first Greek coins were minted in Lydia, but the idea caught on faster than a rumour in a Spartan barracks. By 500 BCE, coins were the norm, and each city-state issued its own currency, leading to a delightful array of designs and denominations. But this wasn't exactly a free market utopia. The value of these coins depended as much on their metal content as on the credibility of the issuing city-state. It's like if your dollar bill was only worth something because people trusted George Washington's face. But hey, if you were a merchant trading in multiple regions, you had to become an expert in currency exchange rates, which were about as predictable as a Greek tragedy. The shift to coinage didn't just streamline transactions, it transformed the economy, making it more fluid and expansive. Suddenly, wealth could be accumulated in new ways, facilitating the rise of a class of wealthy merchants and traders. The economy was now a stage where anyone with the right mix of cunning and luck could become a player. But let's not romanticize it too much. This was still an era where the average worker's life was more about surviving than thriving, and where the term economic stability was as foreign as a Roman legionnaire. Despite the challenges, the Greeks' economic ingenuity laid the groundwork for future civilizations. Their embrace of trade, their innovation in creating a currency system, and their ability to adapt their economic practices to their geographic reality were nothing short of impressive. They were the original world-weary travellers, navigating the economic seas with a mix of shrewdness and sheer necessity. Sure, they didn't have stock markets or Wall Street tycoons, but they had something that might have been even more valuable: a relentless drive to turn their limitations into opportunities. So next time you sip a glass of wine or drizzle olive oil on your salad, remember you're partaking in a tradition as old as Western civilization itself, one born from the rocky hills and azure seas of ancient Greece. So, while you're swirling that olive oil and sipping that wine, let's dig into the soil of ancient Greece. Literally. Agriculture was the bread and butter, or should I say, the grape and olive of Greek economics. But farming in Greece was less about rolling fields of wheat and more about eking out a living on land that was as unforgiving as a Spartan drill sergeant. First, let's talk terrain. Greece's landscape was more rocky than a heavy metal concert, with only about 20% of arable land to play with. Picture farmers trying to coax crops out of soil that was mostly rock, with the occasional patch of earth tossed in like a bonus feature. It wasn't exactly the Fertile Crescent. Those who could farm often stuck to the essentials: barley, grapes, and olives. Barley was the staple grain, the ancient Greek equivalent of the dollar store. It got the job done, but was nobody's first choice. Wheat was the gold standard. But like a luxury car, it required more maintenance and better soil. Olives and grapes, however, were the real MVPs. Olives thrived in the Mediterranean climate, giving rise to that liquid gold known as olive oil. It was the multitasker of the ancient world, used for cooking, lighting, and even as a base for perfumes. Talk about a versatile product. Grapes, meanwhile, were transformed into wine, the social lubricant of the era. It was consumed daily, because back then drinking water was riskier than a blindfolded walk through a Spartan camp. But don't picture idyllic vineyards and olive groves just yet. Farming in Greece wasn't about pastoral serenity, it was about survival. Farmers had to work around the whims of the weather and the limits of the land, often ending up with just enough to feed their families and maybe a little extra to trade. The ideal of the self-sufficient farmer, living off the land and tending to his own needs, was more myth than reality. In truth, many were one bad harvest away from ruin. Now, about that labour force. Slavery was a cornerstone of Greek agricultural life, with slaves doing much of the heavy lifting. They were the silent engines of the economy, working the fields, tending the animals, and generally keeping things running while their owners debated philosophy or plotted political moves. The romantic image of the free citizen farmer is undercut by the harsh reality that, without slave labour, many farms wouldn't have been viable. And let's not forget the sharecroppers, those who farmed land owned by others. They were the ancient equivalent of gig workers, always hustling, often struggling, and rarely getting ahead. These tenant farmers worked someone else's land, handing over a significant chunk of their harvest as rent. It was a precarious existence, where security was as elusive as peace in a Greek drama. The Greek economy, based so heavily on agriculture, was a testament to human tenacity in the face of daunting odds. Farmers adapted their techniques to maximize yield, such as the practice of rotating crops, to keep the soil from being completely exhausted. They also had to innovate irrigation methods to make the most of scarce water resources. The ability to optimize the land's meager offerings was critical, because if you failed, starvation wasn't just a plot twist, it was a real threat. While the Greeks are often celebrated for their philosophical and artistic achievements, their agricultural practices underscore a civilization that was as much about grit as it was about glamour. The harsh conditions required a level of resourcefulness that shaped both their economy and their society. This isn't just the story of crops and fields, it's the story of resilience. Greek farmers were playing a constant game of survival, one that demanded creativity and a fair bit of luck. In essence, the agricultural backbone of ancient Greece was less a bountiful feast and more a tightrope walk over a pit of economic uncertainty. It was a system built on the sturdy shoulders of those who worked the land, supported by a framework of trade and supplemented by the labour of slaves. Next time you bite into a Greek salad, remember the toil that went into those olives and that wine. It's a taste of history, fermented and pressed from a past where every harvest was a gamble with the gods. But hold on to your amphorae, because the story doesn't end here. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of how these agricultural practices influenced Greek society at large. Stay tuned as we explore the bustling agora, where the fruits of this labour met the chaos of commerce, and dive into the world of Greek politics, where economic power played its own game of tug-of-war. Now, let's swivel away from the fields and take a stroll into the bustling agora, where ancient Greece's economic heart truly beat. Imagine Athens, perched like a strategic eagle on the rocky cliffs of Attica, with its eyes set on the shimmering Aegean Sea. This wasn't just any coastal city. It was the Silicon Valley of antiquity, with a port that was a gateway to the known world. Here, trade was the lifeblood, and the harbour at Piraeus was the artery pumping prosperity into the city. Athens, blessed with a prime coastal location and a natural curiosity for what lay beyond the horizon, turned into a trading powerhouse. This wasn't a quaint little market scene with a few stalls and some bartering over fish and olives. No, the Athenians were conducting business on a scale that would make modern Wall Street traders nod in approval. They imported everything from Egyptian papyrus to Phoenician purple, while exporting olive oil and pottery. Those amphorae were practically the Tupperware of the ancient world. But let's not get too caught up in the glamour of trade, because this was no fairy tale. The Athenian economy wasn't built with the gentle touch of a sculptor, but with the gritty determination of a marathon runner. The sea routes, while lucrative, were as dangerous as they were essential. Piracy was the ancient equivalent of ransomware, with Aegean pirates ready to intercept ships and relieve them of their precious cargo. These maritime marauders were the bane of traders and could turn a profitable voyage into a financial disaster faster than you can say, ah. Economic rivalries were as fierce as an Olympic wrestling match. City-states like Corinth and Megara were not just friendly neighbours, they were economic competitors in a cutthroat market. Corinth, with its strategic control of the isthmus, was the Amazon.com of trade routes, offering a shortcut that avoided the perilous Peloponnesian circumnavigation. Meanwhile, Megara was like that scrappy startup always trying to outdo the big players. These rivalries could ignite political tensions faster than you could lose a drachma in a dice game. Trade wasn't just about moving goods, it was about forging alliances and flexing political muscle. Athens, for instance, didn't just trade with Egypt for grain because they fancied a pyramid or two. They did it because grain was the lifeblood of their city, and controlling its flow was as crucial as holding the keys to a kingdom. These trade relationships often required complex diplomatic dances, where one misstep could lead to a war, a bit like negotiating with your in-laws over Thanksgiving dinner. It's easy to romanticize the bustling markets and the rich tapestry of imported goods, but beneath the surface was an economy constantly teetering on the edge of chaos. A bad season of olive oil production, a successful pyrograde, or a political spat could send ripples through the economic pond, affecting everything from the price of bread to the stability of entire regions. The Athenians were acutely aware that their prosperity was as fragile as a ceramic amphora in a toddler's grip. The reality was that trade shaped not just the economy, but the very fabric of Greek society. The wealth generated from commerce funded everything from grand temples to the theatre, where plays that questioned the nature of man were performed. It wasn't just about money, it was about what money could do: build empires, topple tyrants, and transform city-states into legends. Yet, let's not overlook the darker underbelly of this trade-driven world. Slavery was as integral to commerce as the ships that plied the Aegean. The labour that kept the economy humming was often coerced, with slaves working in everything from silver mines to shipyards. The romantic notion of the free Greek citizen was built on the back of enslaved individuals whose toil was as invisible as the wind filling the sails of a merchant ship. Athens, like its contemporaries, was a city of contrasts: wealth and poverty, freedom and subjugation, democracy and exploitation. These contradictions were woven into the very DNA of its economic system, creating a society that was as complex as it was dynamic. Even as the Athenians celebrated their achievements in art and philosophy, they were keenly aware of the precarious balance that held their world together. So, as we sail back into the present, let's not forget the lessons from this ancient marketplace. The Greeks knew that trade was more than just an exchange of goods. It was a complex interplay of power, politics, and human ambition. It was a dance as dangerous as it was rewarding, where every move could tip the scales of fortune. And while we might not face the same challenges as the ancient traders, the echoes of their world still resonate in ours, reminding us that the economy is as much about people as it is about profits. As we leave the agora, with its clamour of voices and the scent of spices in the air, remember that the story of Greek trade doesn't end here. There's more to explore in this ancient world, where the line between commerce and conquest was as thin as a Spartan's patience. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the political machinations and the cultural revolutions that were as much a part of this trade as the goods themselves. So, as we step away from the lively agora, leaving behind the scent of spices and the buzz of deals being struck, let's turn our gaze to the grand stage where economic policies and political ideologies take centre stage, the city-states of Athens and Sparta. These two powerhouses of ancient Greece were like the Coke and Pepsi of their time, each with a distinct flavour, fiercely competitive and fundamentally different in their approach to governance and economy. Let's dive into Athens first, where democracy was the word of the day, and the assembly was the beating heart of their political system. Picture a society where citizens, well, the male ones anyway, could gather and debate anything from war to the price of fish. It was like the world's first town hall meeting, but with more togas and fewer PowerPoint slides. The Athenian economy was as dynamic as their political system, fueled by trade, innovation, and a penchant for public spending that would make modern fiscal hawks cringe. Athens' approach to taxation was a masterclass in civic engagement, or, at least, in making sure everyone felt they had a stake in the city's future. The wealthy were expected to fund public projects through a system called liturgies, which was essentially a way of saying, "Congratulations, you're rich, now pay for the festival." This wasn't just about generosity, it was about prestige. The more you gave, the more you could brag about it at the symposium, with a goblet of wine in hand, naturally. Public spending in Athens was ambitious, to say the least. The city poured drachmas into everything from magnificent temples to the theatre, where tragedies and comedies alike explored the human condition, and presumably gave the audience a break from debating politics. All this largesse required a steady stream of revenue, which Athens managed through a combination of trade tariffs, silver mines, and the aforementioned liturgies. It was a system that worked, as long as the silver flowed and the ships came in laden with goods. Now, let's swap our Athenian sandals for Spartan boots and head south, where life was about as laid back as a military boot camp. Sparta wasn't interested in democracy or debate. They were all about discipline and duty. Their economy was a reflection of their militaristic society, built around the concept of self-sufficiency and the communal good. Picture a place where wealth was measured not by coin but by land, and where the idea of public spending was as alien as a philosopher in a war room. The Spartans had a unique approach to wealth distribution. They simply didn't do it. Land was divided among citizens, but the real wealth was in the labour of the helots, the subjugated population who did the farming while the Spartiates trained for war. This system was the backbone of Sparta's economy, allowing them to focus on what they did best, being the ancient equivalent of a well-oiled military machine. The famous Spartan austerity wasn't just a lifestyle choice, it was a necessity, ensuring that resources were conserved for when they were truly needed, like, say, marching off to battle. Sparta's economic policies were as streamlined as their military formations. Taxation? Barely a concept in a society where wealth was supposed to be immaterial. Public spending? Limited to the essentials of maintaining their military prowess. It was an economy designed for survival, not splendour, and it worked as long as the helots toiled and the warriors remained vigilant. But it was also a system with inherent risks, as dependent on social stability as it was on military strength. While Athens and Sparta couldn't have been more different in their approaches, they shared a reliance on a class of people who were anything but free. In Athens, slaves were the silent gears turning the economic engine, from silver mines to domestic duties. In Sparta, the helots sustained the Spartan way of life, their labour both a boon and a potential source of unrest. Both systems, for all their differences, were built on a foundation of inequality, a reality as harsh as the Greek sun. Yet, despite these stark contrasts, both city-states left a legacy that continues to influence the world. Athens gave us democracy and a cultural renaissance, while Sparta bequeathed a legend of martial prowess and discipline. Their economic systems were as integral to their identities as the Parthenon and the Phalanx, each a testament to the diverse ways societies can organize themselves to meet their needs. The tale of Athens and Sparta is more than a story of contrasting economies. It's a reflection on human nature and the eternal struggle between freedom and order, indulgence and restraint. It's a reminder that every society, no matter how grand, grapples with the same fundamental questions about how to balance the needs of the few with the many and how to turn ideology into reality. As we pause our exploration here, remember that the story of these legendary city-states is far from over. The echo of their choices reverberates through history, challenging us to consider how we, too, might navigate the complex interplay of politics, economy, and society. So stay tuned, because there's more to unravel in this ancient drama, where the stakes were as high as the gods on Olympus and the outcomes as unpredictable as the winds on the Aegean Sea. So here we stand, at the crossroads of history, where the legacies of Athens and Sparta intersect with the wider world. It's easy to get caught up in the grandeur of their stories, painting them as the fonts of Western civilization, the architects of democracy, and the epitome of military might. But let's take a step back and consider the gritty truth behind the gilded myths. First off, let's tackle the notion of endless prosperity. Ancient Greece, as illustrious as it was, wasn't exactly the land of milk and honey, or in their case, wine and olives. Sure, the Greeks were economic innovators, but their prosperity was as fragile as a Corinthian vase. The truth is, economic booms were often followed by busts, with societies like Athens experiencing periods of both opulence and scarcity. The Peloponnesian War, which dragged on for nearly 3 decades from 431 to 404 BCE, depleted Athens's coffers faster than you can say strategic blunder. War, it turns out, was an expensive hobby, and the resulting debt was a burden that even the wisest of Athenians struggled to bear. The myth of eternal prosperity overlooks the economic imbalances that contributed to Greece's decline. Over-reliance on imported grain, for instance, made Athens vulnerable to supply disruptions. A bit like putting all your drachmas in one amphora, it's a risky move that left Athens exposed to political whims and trade blockades. And let's not forget about inflation, a concept that might seem modern but was as real back then as a Spartan's scowl. As silver mines were exhausted, the value of currency fluctuated, leading to economic instability that echoed through the agora. As we peer into the economic abyss that was Greece's decline, it's impossible to ignore the parallels with modern challenges. Overextension, reliance on external resources, and economic inequality? Sound familiar? It's a reminder that the problems of yore aren't so different from those we face today. The lessons of Greek history underscore the importance of diversification, sustainable practices, and the need for a balanced approach to growth. They also highlight the perils of ignoring social disparities, which can fester into unrest, as seen with the helots in Sparta or the disenfranchised in Athens. Yet, for all the myths we bust and the gritty realities we unveil, the allure of ancient Greece endures. There's something timeless about a society that birthed democracy, philosophy, and art, even as it wrestled with its own imperfections. The Greeks' ability to innovate in the face of adversity is a testament to human resilience, a quality as crucial now as it was then. So what of their legacy? Well, it's as multifaceted as a Greek symposium. The political and economic systems of ancient Greece laid the groundwork for Western civilization, influencing everything from governance to economic theory. Their experiments in democracy, flawed though they were, provided a model that continues to inspire nations. Their trade networks, with all their piracy-laden perils, set the stage for the global economies we navigate today. Even their failures, like the tragic fall of Athens or the rigid austerity of Sparta, offer cautionary tales for modern societies. And while history might not repeat itself verbatim, it certainly loves a good rhyme. The echoes of ancient Greece can be heard in the halls of modern parliaments, in the bustling activity of stock exchanges, and in the enduring pursuit of knowledge and beauty. The Greeks, with their mix of innovation and folly, remind us that while the challenges may evolve, the human spirit's quest for progress remains unchanged. As we wrap up this journey through the economic landscapes of ancient Greece, let's carry forward the lessons learned. Whether it's the importance of adaptability in the face of change, the need for equitable systems, or the value of cultural and intellectual pursuits, the Greeks left us a wealth of wisdom alongside their amphorae and drachmas. It's a legacy that, much like their myths, is both enchanting and sobering, a reflection of the best and worst of human endeavour. So next time you find yourself contemplating the complexities of modern economics or the intricacies of governance, spare a thought for those ancient Greeks. They may have lived in a world without Wi-Fi or smartphones, but their struggles and triumphs are not so different from our own. And while the amphorae may be empty, the lessons they hold remain full, resonating across the centuries with the clarity of a philosopher's insight and the urgency of a sailor's call to shore. The Great Wall of China, that sprawling marvel of ancient engineering that snakes across the landscape like a dragon with a chronic case of wanderlust. Now, let's get one thing straight right off the bat. The idea that you can see this thing from space with the naked eye is about as credible as using chopsticks to build a skyscraper. NASA's debunked that myth, but the romance of it still lingers, like the aftertaste of a dubious fortune cookie. The reality is, the wall's impressive enough without space-based sightseeing. Let's dig into its origins, which are as layered as a well-crafted dumpling. Construction kicked off in the 7th century BC, when various Chinese states were more interested in keeping their neighbours at bay than in throwing Instagrammable tea parties. The wall was initially a series of smaller walls built by different states. It wasn't until the Qin dynasty, under Emperor Qin Shi Huang around 221 BC, that these were unified into something resembling the mega fortification we think of today. And by unified, I mean slapped together in a manner that would make even the most enthusiastic DIY raise an eyebrow. Fast forward to the Ming dynasty, when the wall got its heavyweight title, stretching over 13,000 miles. Here's where things get gritty. The Ming folks didn't just add a few bricks and call it a day. They went all out, using stone, brick, tamped earth, wood, and whatever else was lying around to beef up the defences against pesky Mongol invasions. The wall became less of a keep-out sign and more of a we mean business declaration. And business was booming, except for the fact that it was costing a fortune. Talk about manpower. The wall's construction was a massive operation, employing up to 800,000 workers at its peak. Think of it as the largest construction site in history, where the main benefits included backbreaking labour, minimal safety standards, and a view that just wouldn't quit. Workers were a mix of soldiers, forced labourers, and prisoners, all toiling away in conditions that today would make any labour union storm the gates. But why go to all this trouble? Well, besides the obvious keep out the invaders angle, the wall was a Ming dynasty PR stunt of epic proportions. Imagine the empire as a corporation trying to boost its stock value while fending off hostile takeovers. The wall was a symbol of the dynasty's power and determination, a physical manifestation of their resolve that could be seen for miles, just not from space. The economic toll was as big as the wall itself. Building it drained the empire's coffers, requiring massive amounts of resources that could have been used for, say, feeding people or advancing technology. But hey, who needs progress when you've got a really, really big wall, right? In the end, the wall was less about stopping invasions and more about sending a message. It was the Ming dynasty equivalent of a modern do not disturb sign, only a bit more permanent and significantly more expensive. Despite the popular image, the wall wasn't a single continuous barrier. It was more like a sprawling network, a web of walls, watchtowers and fortresses, each part of a strategic chess game played out in stone. And yes, while it had its fair share of triumphs, it also had some epic fails. Invaders sometimes simply bribed their way through or found spots where the wall was more suggestion than deterrent. In the annals of architecture, the Great Wall of China stands as a testament to human tenacity, ambition, and, let's be honest, a bit of stubbornness. It's an enduring symbol of China's history, a mix of myth, reality, and everything in between. So, the next time someone mentions seeing it from space, just nod, smile, and remember that sometimes the truth is just as spectacular as the legend. Now, speaking of marvels that are both myth and fact, let's leave the wall behind and head over to another gem of history, the Forbidden City. It's like the ultimate VIP club of ancient China, a place so exclusive that even the bricks probably had to show ID. Nestled snugly in the heart of Beijing, this sprawling imperial pad housed the movers and shakers of the Ming and Qing dynasties, and, boy, did it make a statement. This architectural wonder was whipped up over 14 years, starting in 1406. Imagine trying to get a contractor to finish on time today, let alone coordinate 100,000 artisans without email or cell phones. The Forbidden City is no small feat. It's a vast complex of 980 surviving buildings, all spread out over 180 acres. That's like cramming more than 135 full-size soccer fields into one place, and somehow they made it look easy. Now, why forbidden, you might ask? Well, this place was the ultimate no-entry zone. The only folks who could waltz in without a care were the Emperor, his entourage, and a handful of select elite. Everyone else? Take a height, buddy. But the appeal of the forbidden is its own kind of magic, isn't it? The idea of a mysterious, untouchable place tucked away from prying eyes has a romance to it that's hard to resist. If only it had remained as exclusive in reality as it did in legend. The construction of this imperial fortress was a jaw-dropping financial undertaking. We're talking about a budget that could make even the most extravagant of modern-day government projects seem frugal. The Ming dynasty poured resources into this project like water into the Yellow River, with wood from the jungles of southwest China and marble from quarries miles away. The logistics alone would make your head spin faster than a politician avoiding a tough question. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't just about having a swanky place to crash. The Forbidden City was a massive power move, a symbol of imperial might, and an unmistakable reminder of who was in charge. The Emperor wasn't just some guy with a fancy hat. He was the son of heaven, and his home had to reflect that divine status. It was the ultimate PR stunt, a grand display of wealth and authority that screamed, "Don't mess with us," louder than a rock concert. Yet, the idea of unbroken imperial seclusion is about as real as a dragon in your backyard. Sure, the Forbidden City was a fortress, but it was also a bustling hub of activity. It wasn't just emperors sitting around on thrones all day. The palace was a workplace for thousands of officials, eunuchs, and servants who kept the gears of government turning. Think of it as the world's most exclusive office park, complete with a strict dress code and a very limited cafeteria menu. And let's not forget the more mundane functions of this royal residence. Behind the grand facades and intricate woodwork, life went on much like anywhere else. The Forbidden City had its own kitchens, stables, and even a modest theatre for the emperor's entertainment. There were gardens to stroll through, libraries to peruse, and, yes, even places for the emperor to catch a quick nap between running a vast empire and attending endless ceremonies. So while the myth of the Forbidden City paints a picture of solemn, unbroken isolation, the reality was far more complex. It was a place of immense power, yes, but also a centre of administration, culture, and daily life. The romance of the forbidden is compelling, but it's the reality, the human stories behind the walls, that truly captures the imagination. In the end, the Forbidden City stands as a testament to the ambition and complexity of China's imperial history. It's a place where myth meets reality, where every brick tells a story of power, politics, and the everyday lives of those who lived within its walls. And while the gates may have been closed to most, the stories they guard continue to fascinate and intrigue, just waiting to be uncovered. As we dig deeper into the world of ancient China, it becomes clear that the real magic lies in the blend of legend and truth, where history is as vibrant as the vivid reds and golds of the Forbidden City itself. As the red and gold hues of the Forbidden City fade into the rearview mirror of history, let's swivel our gaze over to another Chinese enigma that's as mysterious as it is meticulously crafted, the Terracotta Army. Now, if you think your hobbies are extravagant, let me introduce you to Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the man whose afterlife aspirations make modern bucket lists look downright pedestrian. Picture this: an underground army of 8,000 life-sized clay soldiers, each with distinct facial features, standing at attention in neat rows, just waiting to escort Qin Shi Huang into the great beyond. We're talking about an ancient art project on a scale that would make even Michelangelo raise an eyebrow. The absurdity of it all is both amusing and awe-inspiring. I mean, why settle for a simple grave when you can have an entire battalion of clay soldiers at your eternal beck and call? Now, let's not gloss over the logistics. Building this clay core wasn't just about sculpting a few busts over a weekend. It took a staggering 700,000 laborers to bring this vision to life. That's right, 700,000, basically an entire city's worth of people, toiling away so that one man could feel secure in the afterlife. It's like building the world's most elaborate security system, complete with clay generals and infantrymen, minus the Wi-Fi. The whole operation was the brainchild of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. This guy wasn't just a ruler, he was a visionary with a penchant for grandiosity. His unification of China in 221 BC was no small feat. Think of him as the Steve Jobs of the ancient world, only instead of iPhones, he was launching a centralized empire. His innovations included standardizing currency, weights, and even the width of cart axles. Talk about attention to detail. But with great power comes great paranoia, or so the legends would have you believe. Qin Shi Huang is often painted as a tyrant with a penchant for immortal life. Stories abound about his obsession with mercury, used in his quest for eternal youth, allegedly even flowing in rivers within his tomb. But let's pump the brakes on that mythological highway. While ancient texts do mention mercury, the idea of rivers of the stuff is a tad hyperbolic. Modern science suggests it was more likely used in small quantities for its preservative qualities. So, sorry, no shimmering mercury rivers for our clay comrades to paddle through. Speaking of surprises, the Terracotta Army was one of the 20th century's greatest archaeological finds. Discovered in 1974 by a group of farmers digging a well, it was like stumbling upon the world's greatest unburied treasure. Imagine the shock of finding not just a few old coins, but an entire army lurking beneath your fields. Talk about hitting the archaeological jackpot. While the army's discovery was a boon for historians and tourists alike, it was also a stark reminder of the human cost behind such grandeur. The labourers who worked on this monumental project weren't exactly clocking in for a cushy 9 to 5. Many were prisoners or conscripted workers, toiling in harsh conditions with little hope of seeing their families again. It's a sobering thought that behind the beauty of these clay soldiers lies a history of hardship and sacrifice. Yet for all his tyrannical tendencies, Qin Shi Huang's achievements in unifying China can't be ignored. He laid the groundwork for a centralized state, paving the way for future dynasties to flourish. The Great Wall, the standardization of currency, and yes, even the Terracotta Army, were all part of a legacy that would endure long after his reign. It's a classic case of a complex legacy, where the line between visionary and villain is as blurry as a smoggy Beijing morning. In the end, the Terracotta Army stands as a testament to the ambition and contradictions of ancient China. It's a place where myth meets reality, where the grandeur of an emperor's dream is grounded in the gritty truth of human toil. As we marvel at the artistry and scale of this clay legion, we're reminded of the eternal dance between power and paranoia, vision and vanity. And while Qin Shi Huang might have hoped for eternal life, it's his legacy that lives on, etched in clay and history. As we leave the shadowy ranks of the Terracotta Army, there's more to uncover in the rich tapestry of China's past. While Qin Shi Huang's clay soldiers stand vigilant, other wonders await in the wings, ready to reveal their own stories of innovation, intrigue, and indelible impact on the world stage. As we leave the shadowy ranks of the Terracotta Army, we glide over to another feat of ancient Chinese ingenuity, the Grand Canal. Picture this, a waterway so sprawling and audacious that it makes modern infrastructure projects look like child's play. Stretching over 1,100 miles, this ancient aquatic superhighway linked Beijing in the north to Hangzhou in the south, snaking through some of the most fertile and economically vital regions of China. It's not just a canal, it's the granddaddy of all canals. If the Silk Road was the internet of ancient trade, the Grand Canal was its fibre optic upgrade. Now, let's set the stage. This canal wasn't some whimsical weekend project. We're talking about a colossal engineering endeavour that began in the 6th century under the Sui dynasty. It was a time when the Chinese emperors were less concerned with social media followers and more about how to keep their empire glued together. The Grand Canal was their solution, a liquid thread stitching the empire into an economic powerhouse. The sheer audacity of the project is mind-boggling. 5.2 million workers over various dynasties toiled to bring this waterway to life. a labour force that would make even the great wall builders tip their hats in respect. Let's dive into the economics, shall we? Picture the Grand Canal as the Amazon Prime of its day, only without the need for drones. This waterway was a commercial lifeline, enabling the transport of grain and goods to flow smoothly between the capital and the prosperous southern regions. It fed Beijing's insatiable appetite for resources while ensuring that Hangzhou's bustling marketplaces had a steady supply of northern goods. This wasn't just a trade route, it was the empire's jugular, pumping life across vast stretches of land. But before we romanticize this waterway as a peaceful river of commerce, let's splash some cold water on that notion. The Grand Canal also carried political undercurrents as strong as its economic ones. The Sui emperors and later the Tang and Yuan dynasties used it as a strategic tool. Controlling the canal meant controlling the empire's economic heart, a fact that wasn't lost on those with political ambitions. More than a few power plays were made along its banks. Of course, the human toll of such an ambitious project was immense. Conditions for those 5.2 million workers were less work-life balance and more work until you drop. Many were conscripted labourers, forced to endure back-breaking conditions with little reward beyond the dubious honour of having contributed to something grand. It was a brutal business, and the canal's construction left a trail of hardship and sacrifice in its wake. And then there's the political intrigue. The canal was often the stage for uprisings and rebellions, as disgruntled labourers and local governors sometimes saw it as their chance to make waves, literally and figuratively. The Sui dynasty found itself overthrown, partly due to its overzealous canal-building projects, a cautionary tale of what happens when ambition outpaces practicality. For all its harsh realities, the Grand Canal is a testament to human ingenuity and determination. It's a reminder of the lengths to which societies will go to bind themselves together and the price often paid in human effort. While the romance of a tranquil waterway might appeal to the imagination, the real story is a gritty saga of power, politics, and perseverance. As we drift along this ancient waterway in our minds, let's not forget the blend of myth and reality that keeps the Grand Canal afloat in our historical consciousness. It's a marvel of engineering, a symbol of imperial ambition, and a sobering reminder of the human cost of progress. And while its waters may have carried the wealth of empires, they also bear silent witness to the struggles of those who laboured to make it a reality. But there's more to unfold in this tapestry of Chinese history as we continue our journey through the marvels of ancient engineering and ambition. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the stories that shaped a civilization, where myth and reality dance on the currents of time. As we sail away from the Grand Canal's turbulent waters, let's take a moment to step back and appreciate the grand tapestry of ancient China's architectural wonders. These aren't just static relics of the past, they're living lessons etched in stone, brick and clay, each telling a story of ambition, hubris, and the unyielding human spirit. First up, the Great Wall, our meandering stone dragon. It's a symbol of China's ancient resolve, a monument to the sheer willpower it took to stitch together disparate states into a unified defence. But let's not sugarcoat it. The wall's construction was as much about flexing imperial muscle as it was about fending off Mongols. It was a colossal undertaking, with a price tag that could have funded countless other ventures. Yet, its legacy endures, a testament to the lengths rulers will go to project power and influence. And what lessons does this serpentine wonder offer us today? For starters, it's a masterclass in overcommitment. The wall's maintenance was so costly that it drained resources that might have been better spent on technological innovation or improving the quality of life. It's a classic case of putting all your eggs in one enormous stone basket. But the wall's enduring appeal lies in the romance of its myth, a constant reminder that sometimes the stories we tell about our past are as captivating as the structures themselves. Then there's the Forbidden City, the ultimate power pad of the Ming and Qing dynasties. This wasn't just a palace, it was a statement. With its breathtaking architecture and labyrinthine complexity, it symbolized the emperor's divine right to rule. But beneath the opulence lay a bustling hive of activity, a microcosm of imperial China where politics and daily life intertwined inextricably. The Forbidden City challenges the notion of a simplistic, monolithic empire, revealing instead a tapestry woven with diverse strategies and conflicting priorities. Here's where the Forbidden City's lessons come into play. It's a stark reminder that power is as much about perception as it is about reality. The grandeur of the Forbidden City was designed to awe and intimidate, yet it was also a place where realpolitik reigned supreme. It teaches us that while appearances can be deceiving, they are also a crucial part of wielding influence. And what about the Terracotta Army, that underground army of clay soldiers standing guard over Emperor Qin Shi Huang's eternal rest? This is a legacy that straddles the line between madness and genius. Qin Shi Huang's grandiose vision created a wonder that continues to captivate us, not just for its scale, but for the audacity of its creation. It's a poignant reminder of the lengths to which leaders will go to secure their place in history and the enormous costs, both human and economic, of such endeavors. The Terracotta Army is a lesson in legacy management. Qin Shi Huang's desire for immortality through monumental projects speaks to a universal human desire to be remembered. But the irony is that his quest for permanence came at the expense of countless lives. It's a tale that echoes through time, reminding us that legacy is often built on the shoulders of those who are forgotten. Finally, we have the Grand Canal, that audacious artery of commerce and control. This engineering marvel was more than just a waterway. It was a strategic lifeline that bound the empire's economic heart. Yet, it was also a site of political intrigue and human toil, a reminder that progress often comes with a hefty price tag. The Grand Canal teaches us about the power of connectivity. By linking disparate regions, it fostered economic growth and cultural exchange, laying the groundwork for a more unified nation. But it also underscores the tensions inherent in such ambitious projects. The balance between centralization and regional autonomy, and the ever-present struggle between ambition and practicality. As we wrap up our jaunt through these architectural wonders, let's reflect on the bigger picture. Ancient China was anything but a simplistic empire. It was a complex, dynamic entity, constantly evolving through a dance of power, politics, and progress. The structures left behind are a testament to this vibrant history, each one a chapter in a story that continues to unfold. These marvels still captivate our imaginations because they embody the eternal human quest for legacy, power, and identity. They're reminders that history is not just a series of events, but a tapestry of ambitions and dreams, triumphs and tragedies. They challenge us to look beyond the myths and appreciate the gritty realities of the past, to see the world not just as it was, but as it might have been. So, the next time you find yourself pondering the mysteries of the Great Wall or dreaming of the opulence of the Forbidden City, remember the lessons they offer. They are stories of human endeavor, of courage and folly, and of the timeless dance between myth and reality. And as we continue to explore the wonders of the past, let us carry these lessons forward, applying them to our own quests for legacy and meaning in a world that's ever-changing, yet always the same. Once upon a time, around 1000 BCE, give or take a few decades, because, let's face it, ancient timelines are about as precise as a toddler's drawing of a straight line. Greece was in a bit of a pickle. The Bronze Age had collapsed spectacularly, and civilization was picking up the pieces. Enter the unsung hero of antiquity, pottery. Now, before you scoff at the idea of a clay pot being heroic, consider this. Pottery wasn't just about holding olive oil or wine. It was the ancient world's version of Tupperware, Instagram art, and economic stimulus package, all rolled into one. So, the Greeks, being the resourceful folks they were, looked at their muddy hands and thought, we can do better than just making mud pies. They began to craft pottery that wasn't just functional, but also a canvas for storytelling, artistry, and, not to forget, a little bit of showing off. Because, let's be honest, what's the point of having the best amphora around if you can't brag about it at the next Pan-Hellenic gathering? The earliest forms of Greek pottery were practical, sure, but they were also the stepping stones to something much grander. These pots, cups, and jars were the backbone of the economy. They were used to store, transport, and trade essential goods like grain, oil, and wine. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of Amazon delivery boxes. And just like Amazon, the Greeks figured out that branding was key. As city-states like Athens started to emerge from their post-Bronze Age slumber, they realized that having a signature style in ceramics could boost their cultural clout and economic power. Now, Athens didn't become the pottery capital of the ancient world overnight. It took centuries of trial and error, with a few smashed vases and kiln mishaps along the way. But by around 700 BCE, Athens was turning out pottery that was not only functional, but also stylish enough to make even the most jaded Greek aristocrats swoon. These were pieces that told stories, literally. Painted scenes depicted everything from heroic myths to everyday life, each pot a narrative in clay. And let's not forget the economic incentives driving this pottery revolution. Pottery was a big deal because it was durable and versatile. It could be mass-produced, which sounds a bit industrial for the ancient world, but that's essentially what happened. Workshops sprang up, and with them, a system of apprenticeships and guilds. Potters were the rock stars of their day, shaping clay into vessels that were both utilitarian and objects of beauty. This wasn't just about art for art's sake. The Greeks were savvy business people who understood that a well-crafted pot could command a higher price. The more intricate the design, the more it was worth. And as pottery styles evolved, so did the techniques. The Greeks developed new methods for firing and glazing, experimenting like mad scientists in their kilns, trying to perfect the process. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just a Greek phenomenon. As Greek pottery began to spread throughout the Mediterranean, thanks to trade and a bit of old-fashioned imperialism, other cultures started to take notice. Greek pots were found in Egypt, Italy, and as far afield as the Black Sea. They were like the iPhones of their day. Everyone wanted one, even if they had to trade half a herd of goats to get it. And speaking of trade, let's talk money. While we don't have exact figures, again, ancient bookkeeping wasn't exactly up to modern accounting standards, pottery was a lucrative business. A single amphora could fetch a hefty price, especially if it was adorned with the latest in Athenian chic. And as pottery became more complex, with black figure and later red figure techniques, the value only increased. It was a market driven by demand and innovation, with workshops constantly pushing the boundaries of what could be achieved with clay and a little bit of heat. So, the next time you sip your coffee from a ceramic mug, spare a thought for those ancient Greek potters. They were the original influences, shaping not just clay, but culture itself. And while their pots may not have come with a lifetime warranty or a made-in-Greece stamp, they were a testament to human ingenuity and the enduring appeal of a well-crafted object. From humble beginnings to cultural icons, Greek pottery was more than just a container. It was a symbol of a civilization on the rise, each piece a story waiting to be told. Now, let's get our hands dirty, quite literally, as we delve into the nitty-gritty of ancient Greek pottery techniques. Spoiler alert, it wasn't all about sitting on a cool Mediterranean beach, casually crafting masterpieces. No, the journey from raw clay to a finished, prized pot was as grueling as it was fascinating. First up, the raw material itself, clay. This wasn't just any mud you could scoop up from the backyard. The Greeks needed the good stuff, high-quality clay that could withstand the intense heat of kilns without cracking like an overbaked cookie. This meant sourcing fine clay, often from specific regions renowned for their superior deposits. The Athenians, for instance, favoured the clay from the Marne River, its texture and colour lending itself perfectly to the iconic red figure style. And just like any good recipe, preparation was key. The clay had to be painstakingly kneaded to remove air bubbles, a process akin to a full-body workout, ensuring that the pot wouldn't explode in the kiln, a literal nightmare for any potter. Once the clay was ready, it was time to hit the potter's wheel. Now, don't let the serene images of potters gliding their hands over spinning clay fool you. The wheel required a deft touch and an almost hypnotic focus. Achieving that perfect symmetry was no small feat. It was a balancing act, quite literally, between speed and precision. Imagine a world without electric pottery wheels, where one misstep could send your hours of work crashing to the floor. It was a high-stakes game of spin the pot, where the prize was a perfectly shaped vessel. After the potter was satisfied with their creation, the piece was left to dry just enough to handle without deformation. Think of it as letting your cake cool before frosting. Then came the detailing, where the real artistry began. Using slipper, liquid mixture of clay and water, artists painted intricate designs onto the pots. This wasn't just doodling. These were narratives of gods, heroes, and daily life, a visual history book for the illiterate masses. And in a world before Photoshop, any mistake meant starting from scratch. No pressure, right? Next, the pots faced the ultimate test, the kiln. Firing a kiln was part science, part black magic. The process involved a delicate dance of temperatures and timing that would make any modern-day chef sweat. Greek potters achieved their signature black and red hues through a three-stage firing process. First, they fired the pots in an oxygen-rich environment to harden them. Then, they reduced the oxygen, turning everything black. Talk about a dramatic makeover. Finally, they reintroduced oxygen, allowing the non-painted areas to revert to their original red color. One slip-up, and you could kiss your masterpiece goodbye, watching it transform into something resembling an ancient charcoal briquette. But when everything went right, oh, the results were magnificent. These pots emerged from the kilns not just as functional objects, but as works of art, each telling a story that resonated across time. This craftsmanship wasn't merely for the sake of beauty, it was a lucrative business. Fine pottery could fetch a handsome price, and the most skilled potters found themselves in high demand, their reputations echoing through the Mediterranean like ancient rock stars. And speaking of rock stars, some potters achieved an almost celebrity status. Take Exarchias, for instance, a name that might not roll off the tongue, but certainly commanded attention in the ancient world. Known for his black figure technique and detailed storytelling, Exarchias's work was so revered that other artists would sign their pieces, claiming to be as good as Exarchias. Imagine that level of influence, where your name becomes a benchmark for excellence. The celebrity status of these artists wasn't just about personal vanity, it was an economic boon. A pot signed by a renowned potter could sell for a premium, not unlike modern art auctions where a recognizable signature can add an extra 0 or 2 to the price tag. This fame wasn't confined to the borders of Greece either. As Greek colonies and trade networks expanded, so did the reach of their pottery. Artisans and their wares traveled as far as Egypt and the Black Sea, spreading Greek culture like an ancient viral meme. But let's not romanticize the life of a potter too much. Despite the artistic glory and occasional celebrity, it was a life of hard work and considerable risk. The economic stakes were high. One bad firing could wipe out weeks of labor and potential income. And while some potters found fame, many remained anonymous, their contributions to culture and economy largely unsung. Yet they continued, driven by the promise of creating something lasting, something that could tell a story long after they were gone. In the grand tapestry of history, Greek pottery stands out as a testament to human creativity and resilience. It was a craft born out of necessity, elevated to an art form, and driven by economic ambition. The techniques honed by these ancient artisans laid the groundwork for future innovations, influencing ceramic traditions for centuries. And so, as we admire these ancient masterpieces today, we not only appreciate their beauty, but also the hands-on craftsmanship and drama-filled processes that brought them to life. So, as we leave behind the fiery kilns and the bustling workshops, let's carry forward the stories etched into clay, each pot a chapter in the unfolding saga of human ingenuity. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the threads of this ancient narrative, delving deeper into the world these potters inhabited and the legacy they left behind. Just as we close the kiln door on the hands-on craftsmanship of ancient Greek pottery, let's spin the wheel towards its role in the social and political arena of the classical period. Now, you might be thinking, what's political about pots? But in a world without Twitter feeds or viral TikToks, pottery was the megaphone of the masses and the canvas of the elite. Let's dive into the political weight these clay canvases carried. Picture Athens in the 5th century BCE, a bustling city-state with politics as lively as a modern election season. Pottery here wasn't just about function or beauty, it was a medium for storytelling and propaganda. Each vase was a mini billboard, broadcasting tales of gods, heroes, and crucially political ideology. You see, these weren't merely decorative objects, they were the ancient Greek version of a tweet, a visual soundbite that could be shared, scrutinized, and even used to sway public opinion. Now, before you dismiss this as just ancient graffiti, consider the economic implications. Pottery was a booming trade good, the prize of the Mediterranean market. Athenian artisans didn't just sell pots, they exported culture. These ceramic masterpieces travelled far and wide, from the shores of Egypt to the markets of Italy, and each one carried with it a slice of Greek ideology. The Greeks were savvy marketers, and their pottery was the ancient equivalent of cultural diplomacy. By spreading their iconic styles and stories, they didn't just sell clay, they sold a piece of the Athenian way of life. And what stories they told! The black figure and red figure styles of pottery were essentially narrative art forms. Imagine a scene of Hercules wrestling a lion or Athena in combat, etched into the surface of a vase. These images served as both entertainment and education, a visual encyclopedia for those who couldn't read. In a time when literacy was a luxury, these vases were invaluable tools for disseminating stories and ideals. They were the Netflix of their day, binge-worthy narratives immortalized in clay. But not all stories were noble myths. Pottery also reflected the gritty realities of Greek society. Scenes of daily life, farming, feasting, and fighting were common, offering a window into the world of both the elite and the everyman. These pots didn't shy away from the less glamorous aspects of life either. Some depicted drinking parties or bawdy scenes of revelry, a stark reminder that human nature hasn't changed much over the centuries. The Greeks were equal opportunity storytellers, unafraid to show both the heroic and the hedonistic. This brings us to the idea of pottery as ancient Instagram. Just as today's influencers curate their feeds, Greek potters curated their canvases. They captured moments of triumph and tragedy, mundane life and mythological drama, all to be admired, critiqued, and shared. A well-crafted vase was a status symbol, a conversation starter at symposiums, where the elite gathered to discuss everything from philosophy to politics over wine. Of course, in beautifully painted cups. And let's not forget the potters themselves, the unsung influences of their time. An artist's signature on a pot was akin to a blue checkmark on social media. It signified authenticity and prestige. Some potters, like the renowned Exekias, became household names, their work eagerly sought after by collectors across the Mediterranean. Their pieces weren't just functional. They were collectible art, each one a testament to the skill and creativity of its maker. But let's put a pin in the romanticized view of the potter's life. Despite the artistic glory, the reality was often less glamorous. Pottery was a labor-intensive craft, and economic survival depended on both skill and luck. A single kiln mishap could turn weeks of work into rubble, a harsh reminder of the precarious nature of their livelihood. And while some potters achieved fame, many remained anonymous, their contributions to culture largely unrecognized. Yet, their work was undeniably influential. Greek pottery shaped not just clay, but culture, serving as both a mirror and a mold for society. It was a medium through which the Greeks expressed their ideals, challenged norms, and recorded their history. These pots were more than utilitarian objects. They were vessels of human expression, each one a chapter in the grand narrative of civilization. As we draw closer to the heart of the classical period, we see that Greek pottery was not just about aesthetics or economy, it was about identity and influence. The stories etched into these vessels reflect the complexities of Greek society, with all its triumphs and tribulations. Each pot, a storyteller in its own right, carried the echoes of a civilization striving to define itself in an ever-changing world. So, as we continue to unravel this rich tapestry of ancient art and culture, let's keep our eyes on the clay. There's more to uncover, more stories to tell, and more myths to debunk. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the legacy of Greek pottery, exploring how these humble creations shaped not just the Mediterranean, but the course of history itself. Let's dive head first into the gritty underbelly of Greek pottery, a world that's more sweat and sore muscles than grandeur and glory. While we've glorified these clay canvases as cultural icons and economic powerhouses, let's be real, the life of a potter was less about artistic triumphs and more about back-breaking toil. Sure, the end result was a masterpiece, but getting there was a whole different story. First up, let's debunk the myth that every Greek potter was a renowned artist lounging in a sunlit workshop, effortlessly crafting perfection. In reality, most potters were the ancient equivalent of factory workers, churning out pot after pot in dimly lit, dusty workshops. Imagine a scene not unlike a modern assembly line, but with fewer safety regulations and a lot more clay under the fingernails. Pottery wasn't just an art form, it was a trade, one that required a practical skill set and a strong back. Consider the daily grind of your average potter. The day started at the crack of dawn, long before the first glimmers of sunlight hit the Acropolis. Potters worked tirelessly to knead and prepare clay, a process that was about as glamorous as it sounds. To get the perfect consistency, they stomped on the clay with their feet, a workout routine that would make any personal trainer proud. This wasn't just a matter of mixing ingredients, this was a full-body commitment to the craft. Once the clay was ready, it was time to hit the wheel. Now, we've all seen those romanticized images of potters effortlessly shaping clay into elegant forms. But the truth? Achieving that perfect symmetry was a high-stakes balancing act, requiring years of practice and a steady hand. The potter's wheel was powered by foot, demanding both coordination and stamina. One wrong move, and your masterpiece could quickly become a lopsided disaster, an all-too-common occurrence that rarely makes it into the history books. Even after the pot was shaped, the work was far from over. Decorating these vessels wasn't a leisurely afternoon activity. It was a painstaking process that required precision and a steady hand. Potters used slip, a sort of ancient paint, to create intricate designs, each stroke a potential pitfall. Forget one tiny detail, and your carefully crafted scene of Achilles in battle could end up looking more like an abstract art piece. And in a world without erasers or undo buttons, perfection was a tall order. Now, let's talk about those kiln-firing failures. While we love to romanticize the finished product, the road to a successful firing was filled with more suspense than a Greek tragedy. Potters had to manage the kiln's temperature with the precision of a modern-day chef, ensuring the pots were evenly heated. Too hot, and your pot would explode into a shower of clay shards. Too cold, and the glaze wouldn't set, leaving you with a dull, unimpressive finish. The margin for error was razor-thin, and the stakes were high. A single kiln mishap could turn weeks of labor into scorched rubble, a harsh reminder of the precarious nature of their livelihoods. Yet, for all its challenges, pottery was a vital economic engine. Despite the grueling labor, the demand for Greek pottery was insatiable. From local markets to distant lands, Greek pots were the must-have items of their day. The allure of acquiring a piece of Athenian artistry drove trade and fueled economies. Traders exchanged pottery for goods like grain, wine, and even precious metals, making these clay vessels more valuable than they might appear at first glance. And let's not overlook the social complexities that surrounded this craft. While some potters achieved fame, the reality for most was anonymity. Their names and contributions faded into obscurity, overshadowed by the more celebrated artisans who dominated the narrative. But the truth is, these unsung potters were the backbone of the industry, their hard work and dedication the true drivers of the pottery economy. As we continue our journey through the world of Greek pottery, let's keep our eyes open to both the romance and the reality. These vessels were not just artistic triumphs, they were products of sweat, skill, and sheer determination. By peeling back the layers of myth, we uncover the true story of the potter's life, one that's rich in human ingenuity and resilience. So, the next time you admire an ancient Greek pot, remember the hands that crafted it, hands that worked tirelessly in the shadows to create something extraordinary. As we delve deeper into the legacy of Greek pottery, we'll explore how these humble creations shaped not just the Mediterranean, but the course of history itself. Stay tuned for more as we continue to unravel the mysteries of this ancient art form, revealing the stories etched into clay and the lives of those who brought them to life. And as we pivot from the sweat-soaked workshops of ancient Greece to the polished halls of modern museums, let's talk about why these pots still matter today. You might think, what's the big deal about a bunch of old clay? Well, hold on to your amphorae, because the impact of Greek pottery stretches far beyond its original purpose as mere storage containers. Firstly, let's get archaeological. Greek pottery is like an ancient tweet, short, sometimes cryptic, but packed with information. Archaeologists love these relics because they're time capsules, offering a peek into the day-to-day of Greek life. When archaeologists stumble upon a shard of pottery, it's like finding a lost diary entry. These fragments tell us about trade routes, societal norms, and even what the ancients ate for breakfast. Hint, it involved a lot of olives and bread. Sites like the Agora in Athens have yielded thousands of these pieces, each one a clue to the past. They help paint a picture of a bustling city where politics, commerce, and culture intersected. And while the Parthenon gets all the glory, it's these humble shards that fill in the blanks. Now, on to the artistic legacy. Greek pottery has inspired countless artists over the centuries. The clean lines and balanced forms have influenced everything from Renaissance art to modern graphic design. Even Picasso, that artistic maverick, took a leaf out of the ancient Greek playbook. In the 20th century, he produced ceramic pieces that echoed the black figure style, proving that some classics never go out of style. You see, Greek pottery isn't just about aesthetics. It's about the interplay of form and function, a lesson that modern designers continue to embrace. Economically speaking, these ancient pots were the building blocks of an entire industry. The trade of Greek pottery was a significant economic driver in antiquity. It was the ancient equivalent of a booming tech startup, with city-states like Athens leading the charge. They weren't just selling pots, they were exporting a lifestyle. The Mediterranean market was flooded with these goods, and their popularity underscored the economic prowess of the Greeks. Today, the global art market still feels their influence. A well-preserved Greek vase can fetch millions at auction, a testament to its timeless value. But let's not get swept away by the romance of it all without acknowledging the gritty reality. Yes, these pots are beautiful, but they also remind us of the inequality and social hierarchies of ancient Greece. Pottery workshops were often staffed by slaves or lower-class citizens who toiled away with little recognition. It's a stark contrast to the opulent lifestyle of those who could afford to commission such works. These pots, while celebrated, are also a reminder of the divide between the elite and the everyday potter. In terms of storytelling, Greek pottery was the Netflix of its day, binge-worthy narratives captured in clay. This is why museums worldwide dedicate whole wings to these ceramics. They're not just old pots, they're storytellers, each piece a mini-epic that continues to captivate audiences. The British Museum, for example, houses over 13,000 pieces of Greek pottery, making it one of the largest collections in the world. Visitors flock to see them, drawn by the stories etched into their surfaces, stories of gods, heroes, and the human condition. And if you think these pots are just ancient relics, think again. Greek pottery remains a staple in modern education. Students across the globe study these pieces not just for their beauty, but for their historical significance. They offer lessons in art, history, and economics, proving that the more things change, the more they stay the same. The techniques developed by those ancient potters have influenced modern ceramics and continue to inspire new generations of artists and artisans. The enduring appeal of Greek pottery lies in its dual role as both art and artifact. It's a testament to human creativity and its ability to transcend time. So, the next time you walk through a museum or see a replica in a home goods store, remember the legacy of those ancient artisans. They crafted more than just pots. They created a cultural phenomenon that still resonates today. In wrapping up this saga of clay and culture, we see that Greek pottery is more than just an ancient craft. It's a mirror reflecting the complexities of human society. From the anonymous potter's workshop to the grand halls of today's museums, these pieces connect us to a distant past while influencing our present and future. They remind us that art, in any form, tells a story that's still being written thousands of years later. And that, dear listener, is the true legacy of Greek pottery, a timeless testament to human ingenuity, forever etched in clay. In the grand tapestry of human history, the ancient Egyptians weren't just building pyramids and perfecting the art of eyeliner. They were also threading their way through the textile industry, like it was their own version of startup culture. And boy, did they have the skills to pay the bills, or whatever they used instead of bills back then, probably clay tablets or something equally impractical. Let's start with the basics. Linen. Imagine a world where cotton hadn't yet invaded everyone's wardrobes. Linen was the superstar of the fabric world, and it all began with humble flax. The Egyptians were practically obsessed with this plant, and for good reason. Flax was like the multi-tool of the ancient world. You could turn it into fabric, make oil from its seeds, and if you were feeling particularly avant-garde, throw in some flaxseed to really impress your friends with your cutting-edge diet. The process of transforming flax into linen was no small feat. It was almost as if they were auditioning for Ancient Egypt's Got Talent. First, they had to harvest the flax at just the right time. Think of it as picking grapes for the finest wine. Too early, and you'd end up with linen as stiff as a pharaoh's headdress. Too late, and it was as weak as a papyrus scroll left in the Nile. Once harvested, the flax was left to soak in water for a good while, a process known as retting. Now, this wasn't your average soak. It was more like a spa treatment that lasted several days. The Egyptians understood that patience was key, and they had time on their side. After all, the pyramids weren't built in a day, and neither was their linen. After retting, the flax was dried and beaten. A literal beating, mind you, not your metaphorical bad day at the office. They used wooden mallets, which sounds like an unusual way to spend an afternoon, but hey, whatever gets the job done. This relentless pounding helped separate the fibers from the rest of the plant. And then it was time for spinning. Spinning flax into linen was an art form. The Egyptians used spindles with the kind of precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep. These spindles weren't just tools, they were symbols of civilization, each turn of the wrist weaving together the fabric of Egyptian society. The end result? Linen so fine it was almost transparent, a status symbol that shouted, "I'm rich enough to wear something that barely covers anything." But there's more to this story than just the mechanics of spinning. The climate of Egypt played a starring role in the textile drama. With temperatures that could melt the resolve of even the most determined sunbather, linen wasn't just a fashion choice, it was a survival necessity. The material was breathable, lightweight, and the perfect defense against the relentless Egyptian sun. It was the original SPF minus the chemicals. The tools of the trade were as fascinating as the textiles themselves. The Egyptians had looms that were so advanced, you'd think they were on the verge of inventing IKEA flat-pack furniture. These vertical looms allowed weavers to create complex patterns and intricate designs, each piece a testament to the weaver's skill and creativity. And let's not forget the dyeing process. While the common folk might have had to settle for the natural off-white of undyed linen, the elite were draped in vibrant hues, thanks to dyes made from plants, minerals, and even insects. Yep, the next time you're complaining about a mosquito bite, just remember that these little creatures once contributed to the fashion world in a much more colourful way. Of course, the Egyptians didn't keep this textile revolution to themselves. Linen was a hot commodity, traded with neighbouring civilizations for everything from gold to cedar wood to exotic spices. It was a currency of its own, a fabric that connected cultures and continents long before the Silk Road was even a glimmer in a merchant's eye. The demand for Egyptian linen was so high that it became a staple of international trade, a reminder that fashion has always been a global affair. But let's not get too swept away in the romance of Egyptian textiles. Behind the glamour and glitz was a workforce of artisans and labourers who toiled under the scorching sun, their hands calloused from the repetitive motions of spinning and weaving. These were the unsung heroes of the textile industry, the ones who turned raw flax into the luxurious linen that draped the shoulders of pharaohs and adorned the temples of Osiris. And there you have it, an introduction to the world of ancient Egyptian textiles, where flax was king, linen was the crown, and the spinning spindle was the scepter. It's a tale of innovation, adaptation, and a little bit of magic, all woven together in the sands of time. So, next time you slip into your favourite linen shirt or dress, take a moment to thank those ancient weavers who set the standard for style and comfort, long before runway shows and fashion weeks were even a thing. Now, let's delve deeper into the threads of the ancient Egyptian textile world, where linen wasn't just lounging around in tombs and temples, it was the fabric of the economy. Picture the bustling marketplaces of Thebes or Memphis, where linen was as good as gold. Forget crumpled bills or shiny coins. In ancient Egypt you could pay your taxes with a bolt of linen. Talk about wearing your wealth. It was the original flex, long before Instagram was inspiring envy with filtered snaps of luxury goods. This wasn't mere sartorial splendour, it was economic strategy at its finest. Linen served as a currency, traded for goods, services, and even peace treaties. You could say the Egyptians wove their economy from the ground up, quite literally. When your society depends on something as tangible as textiles, you learn to appreciate the difference between a fine weave and a coarse one. After all, a well-made piece of linen could be the difference between a successful negotiation and an awkward misunderstanding, proof that the devil really is in the details. Now, if you were a pharaoh with a penchant for fashion, linen wasn't just a necessity, it was a status symbol. These rulers were the original trendsetters, and their penchant for high-quality linen was a declaration of divine favour and earthly power. It's no wonder they were buried with their finest threads, ready to impress the gods in the afterlife. Imagine being so fashion-forward that even your burial shroud screams designer label. And while we're at it, let's dispel the notion that these were mere funeral trappings. These garments were symbols of eternal life, combining the art of weaving with the mystique of the divine. But let's not forget the unsung heroes behind these luxurious linens, the workers who crafted them. These artisans were the backbone of the textile industry, transforming flax from field to fabric with a skill that would rival any modern-day couturier. The economic might of Egypt was built on their nimble fingers and tireless dedication. They were the assembly line in a time before machines, embodying the grit and determination that fueled the civilization's economic engine. Toiling in workshops, these workers spun yarns and wove fabrics, each piece a testament to their craft. They were the silent makers of the pharaoh's finery, the unseen hands behind Egypt's opulent facade. And while history tends to spotlight the monumental pyramids and grandiose temples, it was the textiles that kept the wheels of commerce turning. This was a society that understood the value of a good fabric, where the weight of a bolt of linen could tip the scales of power and prosperity. In the grand tapestry of ancient Egypt's economy, textile workers were both artisans and labourers. They knew the precise moment to pluck flax, the exact pressure to apply when beating fibres, and the delicate touch required for spinning threads. Their expertise was unmatched, their contributions immeasurable. Without them, Egypt's economy would have unravelled faster than a poorly woven tunic. And let's talk about taxes, because nothing screams civilization quite like making people pay for the privilege of being governed. In Egypt, taxes weren't just a burden, they were a part of life, as predictable as the annual flooding of the Nile. But here's the twist. Instead of collecting taxes in cumbersome cattle or hard-to-store grain, officials often accepted linen. This barter system turned textiles into a form of soft currency, simultaneously simplifying transactions and elevating the textile industry to new heights. This wasn't just an economic sleight of hand, it was a full-blown strategy. Linen was lightweight, easy to transport, and universally desired. It was the Swiss Army knife of ancient currencies, adaptable and versatile. By weaving textiles into the fabric of their economy, the Egyptians ensured a steady demand for their goods, creating a self-sustaining cycle of production and consumption. Now, while linen was the bread and butter of the textile industry, let's not ignore the splashes of colour that dyed the fabric of Egyptian life. The wealthy elite draped themselves in vibrant hues, each colour a testament to their status. These dyes were more than mere decoration, they were indicators of wealth and power, extracted from rare minerals and exotic plants. And, yes, occasionally from squished bugs, because when you're a pharaoh, wearing a garment dyed with crushed insects isn't strange, it's a statement. In this kaleidoscope of colour and commerce, the textile industry thrived, supporting a civilization that stretched along the Nile's fertile banks. It was a world where fashion wasn't just about looking good, it was about wielding influence. Pharaohs might have been buried in gold, but it was the linen that clothed them in life and beyond. This was a culture that recognized the power of the loom, weaving threads of economy, status, and survival into a single, cohesive narrative. So, while the pyramids might have captured the world's imagination, it was the textiles that kept the whole operation running. Think of the majestic monuments as the headline act. But remember that the real magic happened behind the scenes, in the workshops and fields where flax transformed into fortune. The great irony is that while the pyramids still stand as a testament to human ambition, the real legacy of ancient Egypt might just be the fabric that clothed it. In our next installment, we'll dive even deeper into the social and political threads that bound this textile empire together, uncovering the stories of those who lived and worked in its shadow. Stay tuned, because we're just getting started in unwrapping the rich, textured legacy of ancient Egypt's textile industry. As we continue unraveling the intricate threads of ancient Egypt's textile saga, let's pivot to the heart of Egyptian culture, fashion. Or, as we might call it, the original Instagram. Now, were the Egyptians truly the fashionistas of the ancient world, or is this just another hieroglyphic tale spun to captivate and confuse us? Here's the thing. The Egyptians were indeed enamored with aesthetics, but let's not kid ourselves. They weren't strutting down any catwalks. Their clothing choices reflected social status, practicality, and a hefty dose of symbolism. Let's not forget, this was a civilization that believed in dressing to impress the gods, even more than impressing their neighbours. Fashion was never just about looking good, it was about wielding influence and conveying power. Enter the elite, those who might as well have had VIP tattooed on their foreheads. For these high flyers, linen wasn't just a fabric, it was a canvas. Take their penchant for sheer linen robes, for instance. The elite were known for donning garments so fine you could practically see through them. Talk about transparency. But in reality, this was less about scandalizing the masses and more about flaunting their ability to afford such exquisite craftsmanship. When your wardrobe is woven by the hands of master artisans, you want the world, or at least your court, to see it. But let's not get carried away with the notion of a society obsessed with fashion for fashion's sake. The average Egyptian wasn't lounging in diaphanous gowns while sipping lotus wine by the Nile. For the common folk, practicality was the name of the game. Linen tunics and kilts dominated the scene, simple and sturdy enough to withstand the rigours of daily life, yet comfortable enough for the relentless heat. The everyday Egyptian was more concerned with functionality than frills, their garments a testament to the art of understatement. And what about the legendary Cleopatra? Did she really pioneer bold fashion trends that left the ancient world breathless? Well, sort of. While her beauty and style have been immortalized in art and story, Cleopatra's real fashion statement was her ability to use her looks as a political tool. Sure, she rocked the eyeliner like no one else, but her allure lay in her wit and charisma, not just her wardrobe. Her wardrobe choices were strategic, designed to captivate foreign dignitaries and inspire loyalty among her subjects. She knew that in a world of shifting allegiances, presentation was everything. Yet, even Cleopatra wasn't immune to the occasional fashion faux pas. For instance, her excessive use of coal eyeliner might have been iconic, but it also served as an ancient form of sunscreen. Sure, it was practical, but let's be honest, even she might have gone overboard at times, giving new meaning to the phrase makeup overload. Then there's the myth of the Egyptian obsession with gold. While the pharaohs were indeed fond of gilding everything in sight, from their jewellery to their tombs, the average Egyptian wasn't exactly walking around in head-to-toe gold bling. Gold was undoubtedly a symbol of divine power, but for most, it remained a distant dream. The true luxury for the masses was linen itself, soft, breathable and, most importantly, accessible. So, if we strip away the romanticized versions of Egyptian fashion, what are we left with? A society that understood the power of image, but was equally grounded in practicality. Their fashion choices were a reflection of their environment, their beliefs, and their social structures. It was less about frivolity and more about function, with a healthy dose of flair where it counted. Yet, let's not dismiss the appeal of these myths entirely. There's a reason the image of a linen-clad, coal-eyed Egyptian has endured for millennia. It speaks to our fascination with elegance, mystery, and the allure of a culture that seemed to have mastered the art of living beautifully. These myths capture our imagination and keep us coming back for more, a reminder that while the reality might have been different, the dream was compelling. As we weave through the layers of Egyptian fashion, it's clear that textiles were more than mere cloth. They were a symbol of social stratification, a tool of economic exchange, and a reflection of a deeply held belief in the afterlife. Whether you were a pharaoh draped in the finest linen or a labourer wearing a well-worn tunic, your clothing was a statement of who you were and where you belonged in the cosmic order. And so, the fabric of ancient Egypt's fashion narrative was as complex and nuanced as the civilization itself. It was a world where textiles spoke louder than words, weaving together tales of power, practicality, and the eternal quest for beauty. As we continue to unravel this rich tapestry, remember that behind every myth is a thread of truth waiting to be discovered. Stay tuned, because we've only just begun to scratch the surface of the sartorial splendor and social significance that defined ancient Egypt. So, just when you thought ancient Egypt had woven every thread of intrigue into their linen tales, let's toss politics into the loom. Because, honestly, what's history without a little power play? In the world of Egyptian textiles, it wasn't just about looking good or staying cool. It was about spinning alliances and unraveling conflict, one tunic at a time. Take, for example, the diplomatic gift exchanges that were the ancient equivalent of "let's do brunch." Linen wasn't just a fabric, it was soft power in a tangible form. Picture this. a pharaoh sends a bolt of the finest linen to a foreign dignitary. It's not just a gesture of goodwill, it's a statement that says, "Look at our craftsmanship, our resources, and our reach." This was ancient marketing at its best, with threads that tied together kingdoms and secured peace treaties as tightly as any political alliance. Now, let's unravel the myth of the pharaoh as a solitary power. Sure, the pharaohs had divine right and all that jazz, but they were also masters of an intricate game of thrones. And in this game, textiles were the wild card. When Ramses II, the self-proclaimed greatest pharaoh of all time, negotiated the first known peace treaty with the Hittites in 1259 BCE, you can bet that textiles were part of the deal. Linen wasn't just for wrapping mummies, it was for wrapping up politics. It was diplomacy, dressed in sheer elegance. But enough about the pharaohs. Let's talk about the real movers and shakers, the textile industry workers and the bureaucrats. Yes, the unsung heroes who kept the looms spinning and the empire clothed. Egypt wasn't just a land of pyramids, it was a land of paperwork. You see, ancient Egypt had bureaucracy that would make today's DMV look like a model of efficiency. And bureaucracy loves to meddle. Centralized control was the name of the game. The government issued top-down mandates on what to produce, how much, and for whom. Think of it as an ancient command economy where the pharaoh's scribes kept meticulous records on papyrus scrolls. There were quotas to meet, taxes to collect, and you better believe there were inspections. A poorly made piece of linen wasn't just a fashion faux pas, it was a fiscal disaster. But while the state might have had its fingers in every pie or linen basket, there was also a thriving cottage industry. Picture bustling homes where families spun and wove in their spare time, contributing to the local economy and perhaps sneaking in a little entrepreneurial spirit. These grassroots operations were the Etsy shops of their day. They filled the gaps left by the grand state-run workshops and added a bit of colour to the monochrome world of mandated production. Now, this isn't to say it was all smooth sailing. The relationship between the state and the cottage industries was as complex as a woven pattern. On one hand, the state needed the extra production to meet demand. On the other, too much independence was a threat to control. It was a delicate balance, a dance of mutual dependence and wary oversight. The state might have set the warp, but the weavers controlled the weft. And let's not overlook the economic weight of the textile industry. In a world without spreadsheets, the Egyptians had a keen sense of supply and demand. Linen was a staple export, a key player in the ancient economy. The trade routes stretched as far as the Levant and beyond. In exchange for their finely woven linen, Egypt imported wood from Lebanon, incense from Punt, and precious metals from Nubia. It was a global market long before the term was coined, with linen serving as the currency that connected continents. But let's call a spade a spade. While linen was Egypt's pride and joy, it wasn't always spun from pure motives. The textile industry was also a tool of control. In times of plenty, linen production flourished, but during famine or crisis, the state could throttle supply, using scarcity as a lever of power. It was economic engineering with a hint of Machiavellian flair, long before Machiavelli ever penned The Prince. In this complex weave of politics and economy, textiles were both the thread that bound society together and the fabric that could tear it apart. The same bolt of linen that secured a peace treaty could also become a symbol of oppression, depending on whose hands held it. It was a world where the loom was mightier than the sword, where the real power lay, not just in who wore the finest linen, but in who controlled its production and distribution. So, as we continue to unravel the threads of ancient Egyptian textiles, remember that beneath the beauty and the myths lies a story of power, politics, and the timeless dance of human ambition. In a civilization where every stitch told a story, the legacy of linen was as potent as the pyramids themselves. But don't worry, we're not done yet. There's more to this tale of twisted threads and tangled politics, so stay tuned as we continue to explore the fabric of ancient Egypt's fascinating history. And while we're on the subject of how the loom was mightier than the sword, let's unravel why the ancient Egyptian textile industry is more than just a dusty chapter in the history books. It's the OG Project Runway, folks. They spun, wove, and strutted their way across centuries, laying down the threads that would weave through future civilizations. And we're not just talking about the literal threads here. Let's start with the obvious, linen. This fabric wasn't just a passing fad, it was the backbone of Egyptian society, and its influence stretched far beyond the banks of the Nile. Linen was to the ancient world what denim is to modern fashion, a timeless staple that transcended borders and cultures. When the Greeks and Romans came knocking, they didn't just bring their philosophy and gladiators, they also adopted linen, integrating it into their own wardrobes. Why? Because the Egyptians had perfected a fabric that was breathable, durable, and, most importantly, had that effortlessly chic vibe that even togas couldn't quite capture. Fast forward a few millennia, and linen is still strutting its stuff on our runways and in our wardrobes. It's like the little black dress of fabrics, always in style, no matter the century. Its continued popularity is no accident. Linen is sustainable, eco-friendly, and has a natural elegance that cotton and polyester can only dream of. In a world increasingly concerned with sustainability, the Egyptians were centuries ahead of the curve, proving that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Talk about retro cool. Now, let's not pretend the legacy of Egyptian textiles is all sunshine and perfectly woven rainbows. The path from flax to fabric was paved with the sweat and toil of countless workers, whose contributions have been overshadowed by the glamour of pharaohs and pyramids. Yet, their legacy is woven into the very fabric of history, a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance. The Egyptians weren't just trendsetters, they were innovators, crafting tools and techniques that would influence weaving practices for generations. And here's a fun fact that even the most stubborn stain removal expert might appreciate. Textile preservation is a thing of ancient wonder. Egyptian tombs have coughed up linen garments thousands of years old, still intact and whispering tales of a bygone era. Thanks to Egypt's arid climate, which is about as forgiving as a scorned goddess, these textiles survive the ravages of time with surprising grace. We've got scraps of linen, older than the concept of democracy, preserved better than some of last year's fashion trends. It's a testament to both the Egyptians' craftsmanship and the peculiarities of history that we can still marvel at their handiwork today. Now, before we wrap this up like a mummy in freshly spun linen, let's debunk a myth or two. While it's tempting to romanticize the Egyptian textile industry as a world of glamorous pharaohs and extravagant fashion, the reality was far more complex. Yes, the elites flaunted their finely woven garments, but for the average Egyptian, clothing was a matter of practicality, not opulence. The real value lay in the industry's ability to sustain an entire civilization, to serve as currency, and to connect disparate cultures through trade. And in the spirit of busting myths, let's talk about those extravagant Egyptian dyes. While the rich adorned themselves in vibrant hues, these colours were less about fashion statements and more about flaunting wealth. The dyes were labour-intensive, made from rare minerals and exotic plants, and the process was as costly as a modern-day designer handbag. The average Egyptian wasn't strolling the market in technicolor robes. Their fashion choices were dictated by necessity and the unyielding sun, not the whims of a capricious fashion industry. So, why does any of this matter today? Because the story of Egyptian textiles is a reminder of the intricate tapestry of human history, where innovation and necessity wove together to create something lasting. It's a story of resilience, creativity, and the enduring human spirit. In a world where fast fashion often prioritizes quantity over quality, there's a lesson to be learned from the Egyptians' meticulous craftsmanship and sustainable practices. They didn't just leave us with monuments of stone, they left a legacy of innovation and style that continues to inspire and influence. In the end, the legacy of the ancient Egyptian textile industry is about more than just fabric. It's about the threads that connect us to our past and the enduring power of human creativity. It's a reminder that even in the ancient world, fashion was never just about clothes, it was about identity, economy, and the art of living beautifully. So next time you slip into a linen shirt, remember the ancient artisans who spun the threads of history, crafting a legacy that continues to weave its way through time.